Also means that we've been around the council table now for two full years, and we're all still here, so something must be going okay. It's a busy agenda tonight, and so we're going to keep moving on at a pretty good clip through this lengthy agenda. I'd like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Ktunaxa, the Syilx, and the Sinixt people, and is home to the Métis and many diverse Aboriginal persons. We honor their connection to the land and rivers and respect the importance of the environment to our strength as a community. I'd also like to add that today is Giving Day, and so keeping in mind that giving isn't just about being able to give money, but being able to give time. And Nelson's a great community full of volunteers who give of their time always, and I'd like to acknowledge that. And for those of you who might be considering, there's lots of opportunities during this festive time to be going out and helping in many ways. So Giving Tuesday, and yes, we'll just move on the agenda. So is there any late items? I didn't receive any, so I'm assuming not. If I could have an adoption then of the agenda as circulated. Moved by Councillor Pinero, seconded by Councillor Tate. All those in favor and opposed, and that carries. Thank you. If I could have an adoption of the minutes of the previous meeting of October the 8th, moved by Councillor Tate, seconded by Councillor Payne. All those
I have questions. Is that after the seconding?
Yes.
Okay.
There. So you seconded, and you have a question regarding the minutes.
Yeah, under the permissive tax exemption, I think there are a couple of points that didn't completely reflect the conversation, and I'm wondering if we need to remove them or change them. The first point, Councillor Page's recommendation for an affordable housing fund. We do have an affordable housing fund, so I find that misleading. Am I the only one who?
Sorry, say that again.
So,
to add to the affordable housing fund.
and that, so the wording needs to reflect that, in my opinion. That's what I'm saying. It sounds like he's recommending that we have an affordable housing fund. So I think if we could just change it to say to contribute. And then I think it's the fourth point, removal of churches. I think it was the church parking lots, because church PTEs are not a statutory exemption, are they not? So we can't remove them?
So maybe we just need to, because this is permissive.
Yeah.
So this would only be talking about permissive. So this isn't talking about statutory, so I think that's probably accurate, removing of churches, permissive
If I were a resident reading this, I would find
Yeah.
that churches were about to be removed. So
Yeah,
if you
no,
feel
we-
that that's adequately
Well, I think it's
explained,
accurate,
then.
but it might not, if I agree, a third party that doesn't understand this might not.
Yep, that's
So-
all. I think it's important that we have clarity for people who are reading the minutes who weren't able to attend and hear the full conversation.
Yep. no,
But those are just some suggestions for, as I say, clarity around
yeah.
what
So we-
what that discussion said.
So you've captured that? Okay, so then, can I have a mover of the regular council meetings of October 8th as amended? Councillor Tate, seconded by Councillor Woodward. All those in favor of the amended regular council meetings of October the 8th, and that carries. Any opposed?
I wasn't at the meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
That's true, but it was your suggestion.
It was something, a conversation I'd had with others about.
Yes, it was.
For sure, and it was more of a contribution, so. But I wasn't there, so.
Moving on to item 6. So first up on our workshop education programs for this evening, we have the continuation of the resource recovery budget discussion, because as you all know, we need to get this particular piece of budget ratified and passed early on in the year, because this is the bill that goes out in March. So Mr. Jury will be leading us through this last part of the resource recovery discussion.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, so I don't have a presentation. This is just a continuation of the last resource recovery budget meeting that we had, and we didn't get a chance to kind of go through the number side of things. I think at the end, the deputy CFO had passed out a budget to everybody. I did attach a comparative budget to this RFD, so you should have a copy there. But really just wanted to highlight sort of 4 key areas that are the focus of this budget. The first one is it reflects the activities that our organics group is going to be taking over the next year to sort of do further research and analysis of the food cycle program. Also looking at some of those other metrics that came out of the survey, some of the things on recycling as well, and kind of taking all that into account and kind of focusing on that for 2025. The other focal point is, the reason back in 2021 that we started to look long-term at this plan to kind of build this out over 10, 20 years and say, okay, what do we need to make a sustainable resource recovery program that would include not just your operating costs, but also make sure that we're contributing to capital, to equipment. So we really tried to map that out further and have this be a self-contained service using that. At the time it was called the recycling reserve, but we kind of moved it into resource recovery reserve and using that to fund capital. So that work started in 2021, and this budget sort of reflects the continuation of that, making sure that we are set up in a place that, 10, 20 years down the road, we have a program that's, self-funded. The other kind of component in here is to take a look at our equipment costs as well. So we have a line in there that's equipment charges. That's a cost that we put on the vehicle hours that we use for resource recovery. That pays for your operating costs, so that's your fuel and maintenance and oil changes and all that piece, as well as making sure that we're putting enough in there to replace that vehicle at the end of its life. So we've fallen behind a little bit on those charges based on what's happened with equipment costs over the last number of years, and we've kind of held that equipment cost fairly steady. Over the last 15 years, actually. It's just kind of crept up in the last couple of years. We've started to kind of get back on track. But again, that post-pandemic inflation that we saw, things really got more expensive. So we're just trying to get to a place where when we do go to replace those garbage trucks, even if it's like for like, there's enough there to be able to replace those. If we want to move to a more modernized fleet, which is something that Charlie Henderson's going to look at in 2025, to take a little bit more pressure off of the manual side of that, then that equipment comes at a premium. So we'll be looking at all of that as part of the 2025 program. And you can see a line item in there for Public Works to kind of do that work as well, a study into how we can be more efficient, what kind of equipment we need, how can we kind of do this in a more modern approach, because we've just sort of been doing the same sort of approach for a number of years.
What's that line item?
So down near the bottom, there's something that says collection modernization
yep,
study,
thank you.
75,000.
Oh, the study, okay.
Yeah, that's sort of a one-time piece to just allow us to kind of get a better look at what that looks like.
So it was
yep.
budgeted for this year, but not fully utilized?
But I put it in the 2025 budget, so it should be in there.
Okay, yep, sorry. I'm
It's
looking at
not
the
on
line
this
below.
particular
Thank you,
one.
thank you.
It probably is not on the one that went out on
November 18th. or
November,
whatever.
yes.
No.
It is on the one that I attached in there.
Gotcha,
Yeah.
okay.
$75,000.
And, we did have that in our other, we haven't gone through capital yet. We haven't talked about that piece. It was in there, but I've put it into here because this is the conversation we're having. So it makes sense to sort of have it reflected here. And sorry, that last piece there then, we talked about 4 things. 3 of them I mentioned. The 4th one is just to keep up with those other inflationary cost increases. We have 5% increase in labor. We've had a 3rd consecutive year of 10% increases in tipping fees, just other general inflationary costs. That collections block there, that accounts for 60% of the increase. That extra $25 that we're looking for, 60% of that just covers off our increase in collection costs, labor, equipment, that type of thing. So, yeah, that's kind of the plan that we set out for 2025 and future years, and happy to answer any questions you might have.
Just to be a point of clarification, the modernization of the fleet is a study that's being done. We're not making a decision on that at the moment, and so, yeah, there's no costs in that vein included in here. That's just the study.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just to give them a little bit more support so they can do that work. You know, what kind of equipment, there's, you know, 2-stream, 3-stream, give you some options, and kind of, yeah, take it, we'll come back and kind of present what the results of that are before we make a decision moving forward.
Right.
Yeah.
Councillor Payne and then Councillor Page.
I'm just under the capital plan, the pre-treatment devices, the budgeted amount and the projected are, I'm not understanding why there isn't an amount in the projected. What am I missing there?
Yeah, so we had in the budget for 2024 to purchase that last round of food cyclers. We didn't
Okay.
do that in 2024. So
We did it.
we're going to hold off, continue to do some of that study work in 2025, make a decision, and then it's been moved to 2026. If that's something we want to go ahead and do, you know,
Got it.
this is a learning
Thank you.
year coming up, so.
Councillor Page.
Thanks for this work. I like the direction we're going in terms of creating a model here that we could develop a better waste pickup system. I don't want to pet project this or anything, but if we're looking at a study and looking at options, I would just put a bug in the ear. I would like us to reach out to Edison Motors and Merritt. They are doing conversions of heavy-duty pickups now, and I think there might be opportunity there, maybe combined with grants, to look at a fleet vehicle that's made here in BC and is hybrid electric for heavy-duty applications.
Yeah, and we've been chatting with them. Fortunately, Charlie Henderson, our director of municipal operations, was the director of municipal operations at Merritt for a number of years, so he knows those folks pretty well, and seeing where that might work in with what we need.
Great.
Councillor Payne again.
I'm just trying to understand, by extending the pilot and evaluation period for the food cycler, is that the expenses zero waste labor? Is that the $157,000?
Yeah, so that covers off, you know, Mary, you know, portion of Emily, Carmen, that team there to continue to do that work. I think they might, they have a, well, I know they have a budget for a little bit of part-time labor as well to help them out. You know, they still have, maybe 200 food cyclers still to go out, so they want to make sure they get that out the door as well. But yes, that piece covers off that.
And maybe if I could add a bit to that. Yeah, so just to sort of pick up where Chris left off, yeah, there is some for temporary labor support for that. So that's, you know, one of the biggest things that we learned about through the evaluation process of 1 year of the food cycler program is that there's a lot that we don't know about our general waste habits in Nelson. And that's something that we really need to get a better handle on. I mean, ultimately, the goal that we're striving toward here is to reduce the amount of organics going into the waste stream and generally reduce our waste, right? So reducing organics into the waste stream to reduce the amount of methane that's produced once it's in a landfill. So we're trying to get it to the compost pile, and you know, we're doing that in a different method than your curbside pickup. But then as well, making sure that the stuff that is actually being put in the landfill is appropriate and it shouldn't be put in recycling. So we have some funding included in that, and that for that part-time bit, just so we can gain a better understanding of our waste habits of our residents. So one of the things that appears through this initial evaluation, and granted they were point in time assessments that were done, is it appears that we have a lot of people self-hauling. You know, we went to pick up from 100 homes or thereabout, and only half of them had garbage at the curb. So that was an interesting finding for us. We also found that there's a really low component in our waste stream from that same audit of yard and garden waste, which would lead you to believe that they must be hauling it out to the transfer station. Maybe when they haul it out to the transfer station, they also take their garbage out there because it's just convenient. Or maybe they're using their food cycler and don't have a lot of garbage to put out on the curb. So all of these things we're trying to better understand. And so that part-time labor will be used for things like, perhaps, and we haven't fully fleshed this out, but it might be being out at that transfer station, understanding where people are coming from, what they're dropping off, their purpose for their visit, so that we can start to understand the whole sort of life cycle of our waste stream. And that really leads into the next point, that the other thing that we realized through this is our understanding of our waste stream is not great. And we've been talking about this for a while, how, we had a position that came in to really help us transition into organics, and that, it's very likely that position will be very well used to also become just a diversion specialist. So making sure that our recycling is also on point. That's another odd thing that we found, is there's a way higher component of recycling in the waste stream that we found through our audit than we would have anticipated. I think we as Nelsonites all think that we do a really good job of that, but it was a really high percentage of the overall makeup of our waste was recycling. So it just, again, points out that while recycling is something that's been in for 30 plus years now, and we've been doing it, it probably needs some general attention. And this being one of the big deliverables from Nelson Next is to manage our waste and become a zero waste community and reduce the amount of organics in the landfill. This is where this team is sort of starting to point, and this program is looking at really understanding how the food cycle is being used, but also trying to glean a whole bunch of information from our waste stream through that.
And I would just add we have allocated, some of other people's salaries from the climate team here, because we think that's the right thing to do. However, it's not like we wouldn't incur those salaries anyway. They'd just be allocated anywhere else. So there's a portion of this budget that is, even if we weren't doing any diversion, would still have a Carmen and a Emily anyway. So they're not, even though they're here, we could have put them pretty well anyway. So I think it's right to allocate them here because they do that supervision, but their costs that would incur. So that 157 is a good allocation, but probably it's higher than the direct costs of that diversion program.
Supplemental, Councillor Payne.
Supplemental. So I am trying to get a direct cost of what this extension will be. So you're saying it's somewhere under that amount. I think that's an important part of the decision, is it not?
Yeah, I think the number here is a true
What the direct cost of extending this.
Because
it is the true cost, because we do need to allocate
Emily's
to
time
some
will
people.
need to be, without her, then, that supervision isn't there, that guidance isn't there, so you do need a portion of her time to be allocated to this, and Carmen, so I think that's a fair reflection of the time and effort and energy that would go into this.
And
All I'm
the
saying is-
assessment of the curbside pickup will
Is in
also
here.
be
Yeah.
covered under that as well.
Yeah.
That's what I
All
wanted some
those
clarity
costs
on.
in there.
Yes.
Okay. Because there were a few things in there, like the $300 to $400 per bin. That was incredibly inflated from what I've heard from Castlegar and speaking to them. So I was just sort of surprised, but it'll be great to.
No, that is their number.
Yeah, we just went through that process with, we did a bulk purchase.
But they also have the pickups, don't they? The more modern. We can talk about it later.
They did get a considerable grant at one point for much of their garbage bins that they have as well. So depending on who you're talking to, you might get a different price because that might have been reflected of
That
their
may well be
grant
it.
process.
I will check further. Thank you.
Councillors, any further questions? Councillor Tate.
Yeah, sorry, can you say that again? So there's some operating expenses like personnel and such that used to just go under the general city operating that has now shuffled to here to better capture where the hours are being used?
You mean following along from what Kevin said?
I think so, yeah.
No, we've always done it this way. Like
Okay.
we've always had, what are the costs, portions of managers, that type of thing
Yeah.
reflected in here. I think the city manager is just trying to say, you know, if we didn't have this program, it's not like we wouldn't have those people. They would just be, their efforts would be focused somewhere else and their budget would be somewhere else, but.
Okay, so it looks to me, from the $25 increase last year and then an additional $25 this year. So the $25 increase last year was sort of intended to go, from what I recall, and maybe people remember it differently, sort of intended to go into reserves as we were preparing for that 7-year cycle on the food cyclers. And so, I mean, when I look at the numbers, it looks like a lot of it got shuffled down into the reserves. And so it's still kind of sitting there. I'm a little bit muddled because it's got brackets for positive
Yeah,
number,
sorry.
right? So it's going backwards
know.
in my brain. No problem. So then, in this case, and I'm just going to say it back to you what I think I heard, and you can correct me.
Sure.
A lot of this $25 increase needs to be held, for lack of a better word, as we're looking at improving our trucks. Let's just call it trucks and pickup. So that's because I see about $104,000 increase from that $25, right? 4,000 times 25.
Yep.
Yeah. And a lot of that's going into reserve. Some of it's going into like normal inflationary bits and pieces. Okay. So I'm also curious about going backwards, because I've mentioned this to the crew. There was the $35 increase for the blue bins, and then some increases as we were getting excited about food cyclers, and now it's kind of in a holding pattern while we learn more, because there's lots to learn. I'm with you. Are we also saving for new blue bins? Because those are going to come to end of life, right? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I would think the life on those would be pretty long.
Better, yeah.
We do, from time to time, purchase more of them to be
Yeah.
able to distribute. So it's not going to be a situation, I think, where we go and buy a whole bunch of them again. I think it's
Right.
more just as they wear out,
Okay.
they come in, so. yeah.
Okay, and then that $75,000 for the study, help me understand that. Is that bringing in consultant again, like re-engaging with those folks, or?
Yeah, to get a proper report from a third party to come in and evaluate what we do and compare it to other municipalities and what they do, and.
Is that
learn
not
from
what we
that.
heard in November? Similar? I felt like it was somebody else, but I was on Zoom.
Yeah.
In November, this 75,000.
It's for the next year.
Is
Is
for the
for-
modernization. So outside of organics, in general, currently we still, we're probably one of the few municipalities where you have a driver and 2 swampers behind the truck that are manually throwing the trash in there. And that's something that we've recognized that we need to move forward on from a health and safety perspective.
Right.
Is that modernization. Now there's a lot of options that go into modernization out there now. There's different models from the different communities, and so that's what we're trying to understand as we get to a point where some of our trucks are coming to the end of their life. It's time to start looking at whether we go with that automated sort of arm that picks up the bins and dumps them in themselves. Do we go with there's some communities, albeit flatter communities, that have a central sort of dumpster approach that every block has one. We've talked about how that would be challenging on some of the steeper roads that we have to find a location for that. But basically just understanding what that new style looks like, what the costs associated with it are, and what the best sort of way forward with that is.
Yeah, I think it also involves how do we collect in a new system. We collect a lot in laneways now. That's probably not possible with a new larger arm truck. So now people have to, it'd all have to be on the front street. We have very steep streets in some cases. So anyway, it's a bigger picture than just the vehicle. It's how would that vehicle operate in Nelson?
Is that an external consultant?
Likely, yes.
Gotcha. Are there no grants available for that?
As always, we'll be looking. I think most of the grants in that realm are around the organics, which we've done pretty well on those grants to divert the organic stream, but we'll always be looking.
I think there's a planning grants, maybe, that might fit. So if there are grants, we'll definitely go after them, and all that will do is would create a surplus in here, and that would, we'll go to replacing equipment. So we think that would just create a better situation than this one.
Sorry,
Supplemental?
my set of questions is always like a conversation. I apologize. So then I understand correctly that we're not kind of right now, the way that this is getting described and allocated in our minds for the future, right now we're not saving for replacement of food cyclers. Is that correct?
Well, we're getting to a point where, to get to a sustainable level, if we were going to replace food cyclers, replenish our reserves, once that 7-year warranty runs out, be able to buy more, we need that annual fee to increase. And so we need to get to a point where it is sustainable. And I think I sort of mapped it out on that 10, 15-year plan, what that would look like. So we're moving in the right direction. Are we saving for food cyclers? Well, we're putting money in the reserve so that when we do come to that time to replace them, we'll be able to replace them on its own. We won't need to look for another round of grants. We have a self-sustaining kind of program here. So we're moving in that direction without trying to create a situation where, fees would have to increase substantially in one given year. We kind of gradually get to that point.
Thanks.
Councillor Woodward and then Councillor Page.
Actually, I think Councillor Page, you were first. Go ahead.
No, Councillor Page has already spoken. You haven't
Okay.
spoken yet.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess my question is, our geography is, it is very challenging. And I'm wondering if, I guess that would be what a consultant would do, is if there were analog towns, mountain towns that deal with what we deal with. But as you were talking about the challenges, I'm just like, it is really, there's no wonder that we're using what we're using, swampers on a truck. And my query is, what if that is the only way we can actually do it, and that automation actually doesn't work? What would we, if we were to try to mitigate for health and safety, are there any other options?
Yeah, and again, that's part of the point. Your point is well taken, and that's why we're looking to have some professionals come in and help us. And I think it's an important thing to note too, that in this, we have a lot of really knowledgeable, talented staff that could probably otherwise crunch a lot of this down, but they're kind of busy doing all the other stuff that it takes to run a city, right? So in this case, you get somebody in who's a specialist, they deal with it, they allow for that sort of peaking power, if you might say. So yeah, to be perfectly honest, where we're at right now with the system that we have is our crews are going flat out during the garbage weeks. They're going so much so that every day it's kind of bordering on that. Do we need to have some overtime to collect all the garbage? So if we did end up going with that manual approach, still, there would be an expansion of resources probably. There's also some smaller trucks that allow for, that picking up, but then as well, that adds time. The arms are quite efficient. They come, they dump, the picking up, the smaller trucks that get in the alleyways, or if it's too steep, and we have to stay in the lanes, then those smaller trucks kind of have a clamshell that lowers down so you don't have to lift as high. But then you lose all that time of that clamshell lowering down and then dumping it back up. And then you also have a smaller truck, so you're actually doing more laps, right? So it's all of those things that kind of need to be considered and compiled in all of it, and understood what's, the new units are capable of, and, what are they capable of in normal times? What are they capable of when it's really deep snow, right? Maybe it's that we have a contingency plan, during Snowmageddon when it happened and everybody brought their garbage down to a central location because it didn't quite work, So it's all of those things that are going to be considered, but I can tell you right now, with the methodology that we're using, we are completely maxed out, and there's all the efficiencies that could be found have been found over the last, decade plus, when it, as Nelson kind of grew to that critical point. And then it comes down to just more crews. If you get more crews on, it's either you're doing one of two things. You're either picking up, part of the town on this week and then the other town, but no matter what, you're running a whole new shift, because we have alternating week garbage pickup, which means that when they aren't picking up garbage, they are out plowing roads. They're out supporting our field crews in public works and parks. So there's a lot of extra capacity there that would need to be filled in. So
it could be just an expansion of the cruise. That might be the answer, but we'd have to see.
we'll have to see, and that's a pretty spendy decision,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Moving to every week pickup is will be a significant uptick. The crews to be able to run it or to backfill on those public works or
For sure.
park side of things. That's not insignificant.
Inconsequential. Yeah, for sure. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Just being mindful of time, Councillor Page.
Yeah, just looking at the budget here and thinking about the 1-year extension and reevaluation or an extended evaluation of the organics program. Is it prudent for us to put monies in here to leverage a third-party consultant to complement the first report we have?
Don't we already have that?
So we kind of keep a chain of,
Yeah. So you're talking about the budget for, to help Mary and Carmen and that group do that work, or?
no, I'm breaking apart from that. And at our last conversation around the results from the waste from the Green Municipal Fund project for the organics diversion and what was there, and then identified that, we may not have a good understanding of exactly what's getting picked up and want to do it for another year to see if we can improve on those diversion rates. There, I think it would be important to also spend on a third-party consultant to complement the first report, so that extension, there's an extension there that we could potentially put money towards. And do we have that in this budget? Or should
We have
put
money
this-
for more waste audits supported by a consultant to make
Okay.
sure those are accurate, yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
it's not just our own staff. They have their
Yeah, I just
leveraging
want
some
a
other
continuity of that pilot
Yeah.
to be there. Okay, great.
Councillor,
I'll move the recommendation.
okay, is there a seconder of the recommendation? Seconded by Councillor Page. Councillor Woodward.
The council directs staff to prepare the fees and charges amendment bylaw to reflect the 2025 rate for water, wastewater, and resource recovery as per the budget discussion of October 8th and November 8th, 2024.
It's October 11th. Okay, and that's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion, councillors? Councillor Payne.
I just want to note that an increase from 2019 of $40 to an increase in 2025 of $150 is pretty significant. I know we have lots of explanation for why that happens, but I still think it's one of those things that's, because it's a smaller amount, it tends to slip under the radar, and I just see it as a huge increase that the percentages are high. They're significant for things that were brought in and then were supposed to be backed out and then moved to another way. And so just a comment. So that was it.
Can I just add some context to that?
Yeah.
So, yes, the fee did increase in 2020, I guess, right? Yeah,
2020,
40 to
yeah.
70, yep, to purchase those blue bins.
Yeah.
Timing-wise, it was fortunate or not fortunate, or however you want to look at it, that was the time we also started to look forward to, okay, what does a full organics program look like? If that had happened 2 or 3 years later, maybe we would have brought the fee down and then brought it up back even further, but it happened in the subsequent year. So it was, okay, and that was also the first time really that we started to look at, okay, what does a whole program constitute as far as making sure we're encompassing that capital component as well, because we were really just looking at operating costs. So this is what it costs to collect, and there's some tipping fees. But kind of building that out and saying like, okay, well, there's some capital to this too that needs to be captured. That's got to get funded somewhere. It should be in this budget. So let's look out 10, 20 years and sort of make sure that we have something here that works for, the long term. So that was the reason for getting more kind of granular with this and trying to say, okay, what does that fee need to be in order to make this plan work?
And we're still doing an evaluation for the next 12 months, but we're increasing it by $25 in any event because there's something out there.
Yes, there's those operating cost increases, so that would have to get factored in. And we want to start building a reserve for whether it's food cyclers or green carts or whatever happens here, there's something there that we can leverage to help fund that.
Councillor Tate?
I just a correction to the recommendation. I'm pretty sure we talked about this on October 11th, not October 8th. I don't know if that matters. It's just a little niggly thing. I have
think you
October
had
11th.
I think you guys talked about water and
October
wastewater a
8th was
couple times, but
October 8th was a regular
did.
meeting. October 11th was that workshop on the Friday. So which one is more appropriate? I don't know.
Yes, it was on the Friday for sure.
Okay, so that should, 11th, yeah. It's just because I have my, like, October 11th on.
and that doesn't need an amendment, you just.
Okay.
So that's been moved and seconded. So seeing no other hands up for further questions, all those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. Councillor Payne?
I don't need to be noted.
Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Okay, moving on. Next we have Nelson at its best. So I'll ask Katie and Allison to come forward. And so they're doing, unfortunately, we had to cancel the November 19th meeting because we were concerned about having quorum. And Nelson at its best was going to be one of our delegations that evening. And so to not get our delegation list to a long time, it takes a long time to get a delegation here. We've arranged for some time today for you to be doing your presentation. So over to you.
For these, I see that these
Yeah.
are to be handed out.
That would be great.
Okay.
Does everybody have, or we
We
don't
don't
yet?
have it yet.
Okay.
We have it.
Coming.
Okay. While it's coming, I'll introduce ourselves a bit more. As you're handed out this sort of like a page that gives a sort of snapshot about what we're talking about to accompany the brief. My name's Katie McEwen, and Allison McDonald is here from Nelson at its best. And we're just really excited and delighted to be here to present this. This has been a long time coming. And just before we begin, we wanted to to move the poinsettias. Just as said that was like Giving Tuesday, there's a sense of like also thinking of the other hats we wear that are more than just our work hats. They're all councillors here, city councillors. I'm here, I work at the Nelson United Church as community engagement, but I also wear a hat as a single mama with a kindergartner at Hume School, and I'm a participant at the Women's Center and the Shambhala Center, and just thinking of the different ways we give and receive in our community. And Allison?
My name's Allison McDonald. I'm the Community Economic Development Coordinator at Community Features Central Kootenai. And I think, the hats I wear, I was a Nelson Police Department Restorative Justice Facilitator for a while. And I think giving to community is something that I'm very passionate about and aim to do in everything.
So, we want to spend as much time as possible in the conversation and questions, so we're going to try to be quick in going through the presentation of our call to action, strengthening community safety and well-being through social development coordination. So we just begin with our shared aspiration. We've got our aspiration there as Nelson at its best, that caring and compassionate community, but it really is matching a lot of the language in the OCP vision, OCP 2050 vision document. So I'll just quote from that. In 2050, Nelson has a strong community identity where all residents feel that they belong and have community support to turn to in times of difficulty. Nelson's community strength and commitment to health and safety for all ensures that houseless community feel like they belong. So some of that language really ties what we're talking about together. So that's the shared aspiration or vision. Then we've got our current challenges, toxic drug crisis, mental health crisis, houselessness, all of that. The realities on the ground right now are high rate of poverty. This is where I wear a metaphor came to me wearing my hat as a mindfulness instructor, and it seems that we've got this like beautiful vision that are the eyes, and then we've got the ground, the sort of like reality as it is, and the challenges. And what we're bringing today is something that is linking them together, sort of the legs, the vehicle or path forward, the approach on your the one-page piece, which is that we'd really love it if the City of Nelson pilot a 3-year full-time social development coordinator position. So this has been something that Nelson at Best has been researching and exploring for quite a number of years. Margie just told me 10 years ago they first started talking about it. Recently, it's been more and more communities that are closer in size to Nelson have been taking on this position. Penticton and Cranbrook are some of the communities we've looked at that are most closely. Penticton's, for example, it was linked to in your brief, but their social development framework was something that I found really inspiring. And to quote from that, the mayor says, because that's, to be clear, that's what the first piece that the social development coordinator would be working on, is creating a community-driven social development framework to guide their work. And from the Mayor Julius Bloomfield of Penticton, what makes the framework unique is the collaboration that recognizes no one group can solve the challenges that lie ahead. The Social Development Department is designed to be the connective tissue that fuses the work being done by the senior levels of government and nonprofit organizations. So not being a top-down, it really came from the community and being that connective tissue. Who is involved is really lovely that it's right in the center, because it could be just said everybody, but really there's so many organizations that would need to be part of this, and there's so many organizations who want to be part of this too. We've been speaking with and have a lot of curiosity, support, and want to be part of how to turn that vision into reality. And at the bottom there, we've got the cost benefit analysis. I know it's a good question of like, where did we get these numbers? And largely through conversations with the social development coordinators who are in Penticton and doing some estimates. Also looking at like, what does the city already spend less maybe in terms of instead of on the preventative and the framework and the like upstream, and what is spent maybe more on the cleanup, that could be moved upstream to this vision. So I've been trying to be quick and brief because I am really curious. This is exciting to me. It's exciting to these people who are sitting behind me. And so I'd really love to hear questions or what more information you as councillors need to explore this important call to action.
Councillors, questions? Councillor Lockenberg.
So, thank you for this. And I've been thinking a lot about community resilience as a broader frame. And so I'll just say, while I support the intent and the vision, I actually think it doesn't go far enough. And by that I mean, I think there's this principle that has been applied in healthcare for years and in emergency services, the principle of the right of rescue, that we need to respond to the crisis that's in front of us, and that if it's in the case of emergency, you basically spend any amount of resources to deal with that emergency. And I think that principle of right of rescue is becoming overly applied in society-wide, and we've tended to neglect, at the expense of the holistic community well-being and resilience. So if we let go of the right of rescue for a minute and apply a framework based on health and resilience. So C40 and a number of other major organizations have developed these community resilience indexes, these community resilience plans, and the way they get implemented is in terms of a community resilience coordinator. Or in bigger cities, it's like an entire resilience department. And what I really like about that model is that it doesn't cut up or slice up the community in terms of sub-communities and focusing on, well, this sub-community is where the problem is, so we need to put our resources and really focus on the sub-community. It takes a step back and recognizes that that sub-community has so many intersecting relationships, and you need the entire community inevitably to support that sub-community. And if the capacity is diminishing in the broader community for whatever economic pressures or climate pressures or so on, then everything gets undermined and the overall resilience of the community gets undermined. So I've been thinking about the crises we have in front of us in the next 5-10 years. Obviously the climate crisis overwhelms everything. It's a dominant crisis that then creates conditions in which all of the other crises get much, much worse. We've got economic crises, whether it be through inflation and on and on and on. It just continues to compound and compound and compound. And so if we're to have a social development coordinator, and that social development coordinator is overly focused on this community and coordinating activities in this community, without taking this step back, looking at the community as a whole, almost as if it were an entire organism, and asking the question, what is the capacity, and what is the adaptive capacity of this community to respond to crises, of which this current one is just one, and is all intersecting with a whole bunch of others, then I think we're going to be missing a necessary opportunity to become more integrated so that our climate team upstairs is a part of playing a role in building the social development and the adaptive capacity of our vulnerable communities, that our public works and whatever we're doing in terms of working with IH, all of those things are playing a role that the entire community not only benefits from, but really has a role to play. And I worry that if we just narrowly focus now, we're missing the bigger opportunity. So what I'm going to propose, and I'll just put this on the table, and then if we refer this to staff, that we do invest in a coordinator role. But rather than call it a social development coordinator with this mandate, it would include this mandate, but it's a resilience coordinator whose job it is to encompass the economic, the environmental, and the social well-being of the entire community, because recognizing that all of those things reinforce and impact one another. So I just wanted to share that with the community. I don't have any specific questions. It's really well presented and very clear, and it's something we've talked about for a long time. So thank you.
Councillor Page.
Thanks for that. I'd like to see us solve everything I see on the sheet, the impacts, address, help coordinate access to services, help figure out where the gaps are, help link those services. I also agree that, the jurisdictional boundaries of the city of Nelson are not where the problem stops. And the lack of intervention and lack of support outside the area and in the interconnected neighbors that people move through is part of the problem, part of where we need to address the problem. I would be supportive of referring this to staff, and I would want to give us a mandate of matching funds and reaching out to Castlegar, to Trail, and to the regional district, and really exploring with partners like Interior Health what it would be like to put some funds together to have a coordinator that's working along this corridor and capturing what's going on in Fruitvale and Salmo and how people are moving between services and how people are, how gaps and improvements or gaps in amenities to support people in different communities is creating poor delivery service, and how we can solve that as a region. And I would be willing to put skin in the game, but I think for this to be really effective, it lives somewhere slightly above the city of Nelson, but I think we're a partner there. I think we have to be there. I think there's money we put towards it, but I think we reach out to Castlegar, we reach out to Salmo, we reach out to the regional district, and we say, hey, what does this look like if there are 2 of these people working across all of these cities to get some programming in place and to support all of the different events that we've seen over the last few years and all the different tragedies for individuals that have been happening over the significant number of years. So that's where my head is at. I don't have questions there too, unless you wanted to speak about any experience or any consideration of how that role might look if it was shared with some of the other local government partners we have in the area.
Yeah, I don't have a quick answer for that. It is something that is worth exploring. I think that is something like we have had, not myself, but Kim and Rona have had conversations with the social development coordinator in Penticton, and they hired one, and then within a year said they wanted to hire a second. So it is a model that is happening in other communities and successfully. I'm interested, Councillor Logdenberg, of sort of like, I do want to keep it, it's definitely not my project at all, but the social determinants of health are broad. It's definitely beyond addressing one particular vulnerable community. It really is, a big piece of it, I think, is that community-driven framework which says, what are our priorities? What do we need to and want to focus on? And our is the biggest hour of everyone, and including the whole community. The business community has to be involved, and the emergency services. It's definitely not just the social services community, but everyone.
Councillor Pinero and then Councillor Payne.
So yeah, thanks. Just recognizing that, Nelson does have lots of organizations that do great work, and to some degree, they do speak, to some degree. And I'm just kind of wondering if you could sort of illuminate how, like maybe for an example, like some sort of crisis that we've gone through in the last little bit here, whether it's, I don't know, whatever example you'd care to provide, but overdoses or homelessness or even natural disasters that we've sort of dealt with, how a social development coordinator position would have improved the outcome of that specific thing, just so that we can have like an idea of how that role actually looks in a real life scenario, So we've all sort of been through those things, and we've had outcomes, and some of them, I think everybody does the best they can, but recognizing that it could be better. How would that look?
Yeah. So 2 things come to mind. One is an example from the city of Penticton sharing that they had a motel that burned down that housed 25 residents that were of the vulnerable population. It was emergency services who was dealing with it, and immediately thought, I need to call the social development coordinator, because that is the person who has formed the relationships with all the organizations who house people and who feed people. So within, I think it was a little over 3 days, 48 hours, whatever it was, that they managed to get those individuals housed. So it did work along with emergency services, like responding to a crisis quickly, just by really having those relationships and knowing who does what and who can pivot quickly and serve the community. And that's sort of more responding to something that just happened. I think also we think of the homelessness and encampment situations, protest when the hub was closing, and the sense of when we know something in advance and there's a shared, again, the coordination of seeing what's coming, who are the key players, who's leading this particular table, whether it's food security, whatever's being identified as the center, who's leading it, who is supporting it. There's just a sense that working together as opposed to, as you say, the various social service organizations, I think, have great goodwill towards each other, to a certain extent, some communication, and yet they are responsive to their own funders. They have each their own plan, and they have their own competing for grants, so they operate to a certain extent in somewhat siloed, working on their own particular population. So to have a coordinator would see that it's more than just housing, it's more than just food security, to see sort of a bigger picture to be able to respond.
Can I have one more?
You can have supplemental, sure.
Thanks. Thank you. And it was an interesting point that Councillor Page made about sort of the interconnectedness of this region, I mean, the province as a whole, and the social issues that are prevalent everywhere, but also just in this region. And so if there was some sort of expansion of this role to coordinate within the region, are there other cities in our region that have this? Like, is there somebody for that person to talk to in Trail? Is there somebody for that person to speak to in Castlegar? Or are they then sort of getting to know all of the development, all of the services that exist there as well? Because that seems like a very large job if there wasn't just a contact point with those other communities. It's recognizing that it is sort of it's an uphill climb to try to deal with these issues in our own bubble, because they're not confined to our bubble, to be honest. And so that interchange between communities is super important. Do we have somebody that we can speak to in other communities, should we choose to do that?
I mean, I think like most cities have staff who are doing some social work off the side of their desks, and but those communities, as far as I know, don't have like a designated social development person in place. Cranbrook has their social development coordinator, which does include partnering with the RDEK. So that would be a good example of bringing in those rural communities as well into the work that they're doing.
Can you expand on the part? Well, like, how are they partnering? Are they paying
Funding.
for each other?
Funding.
Funding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Let's
Yeah.
do that.
No, I believe Councillor Payne is next, and then Councillor Gordon.
Yeah, knowing that this has come to the table a couple of times when I wasn't here, I actually did a little historical looking, and I looked back to the previous OCP, where there is a section that talks about how under healthy living and social well-being, and it's so interesting that you bring up this resilience coordinator, because when you talk about that, I see this. I think this is the health and well-being of the community based on the social determinants of health, that we've gone through the pandemic and seen challenges in all socioeconomic areas of our community. But it says the city can be a proactive participant or facilitator in the delivery of community social services, and recognizes the challenges of doing so without overburdening the municipal taxpayer. I think there's lots of ways to do it. I'm pretty sure you've mentioned some in here, how many of the social development coordinators out there, similar to what's happened at our own fire department, have significantly increased the amount of money available for this work through applying for grants that often within the current context of the city we may not have access to. So they more than pay for their position, which is a definite bonus. And I appreciate the idea of bringing in other partners, but I do think that sometimes there's a role for us to play as a leader in this by establishing this, dropping the pebble into the pond and having the ripples go out. Is $110,000 a huge investment in the well-being of our community? When I look at some of the other things that we have coming forward as we look at the budget, there are bigger numbers out there when we consider the return and the challenges that are continuing to come forward as we face, for many people, dire economic situations. The other thing, in addition to homelessness that's rising up in this particular area, is food security. The food banks are absolutely overwhelmed, and we'll see more and more of that as we move forward, especially in this season where generosity is fortunately part of Giving Tuesday and beyond through the holidays, but drops off significantly in January and February. And it becomes really challenging. So I'm really excited to hear I haven't looked or heard of that resilience coordinator, but to me, it's just the same concept, the same visioning in a different format. And I love to do more research on that moving forward. It's not, I don't believe this is targeted at a specific sector of our community. I believe that, is it Martin Luther King, and I'm going to misquote, we can only be as healthy as the least healthy among us, and I know that's misquoting, but I can't rest easy when I know that others are struggling. And so I think it makes us all healthier and happier and resilient. Those are my thoughts. Thank you so
Councillor
much for
Woodward.
your presentation and the way you've put it together so concisely here in a one-pager. I love that.
Councillor Woodward, then Councillor Lochinvar, I'm going to pass you because I haven't had Councillor Tate yet. Then I'll come back to you. And then again, I'm sensitive about the time here, folks.
Thank you, Mayor. I was wondering, have you done a survey of our staff? Have you talked to our GM or our emergency management coordinator? Have you spoken to people within our organization that do some of this work already to see what we're doing as a staff already?
I think we haven't, but I think that's a great idea. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, I was
Because-
like, Rhoda's spoken to Chris.
You know, we definitely don't want to duplicate roles. The costs here are essentially a 1% tax increase on already heavily burdened citizenry for taxation. But it's about $100,000 is about a 1% tax increase. So I would challenge you to actually interview some key staff members, especially our emergency management coordinator, which definitely overlaps when there's a cold event or a heat event or other events. He does coordinate and work with social sector. And so I would say before launching down this road, I would just check out what we're doing already. There's already Nelson Committee on Homelessness that meets, Fentanyl Task Force. There's groups that meet already and coordinate with the city already. So I'm just going to leave it there. I would just challenge you to figure that out first and to see if maybe there's a more efficient way of doing this rather than creating a whole new position. Maybe there's a way of utilizing what we already have and we're already doing. So, thank you.
Yeah, can I respond a bit, or should I wait?
No, sure. I mean, that you're here to answer their questions. So as long as I'm just sensitive to the
Okay.
time. Like it's a really tight agenda tonight.
Yes.
My apologies, but you know.
I think that all I want to say is I think there is a cost of just sticking with status quo of how we are doing things. That, yes, there is people who are doing some level of coordination. I agree with you, those organizations exist, but not something like this, not something with this big view of saying, how are we going to get this OCP vision of a caring, coordinated, compassionate, resilient community? How is that going to work with the current situation we have, the sort of like bigger view coordination that doesn't happen at the moment. It is off the side of people's desk. It's people who are doing it. So you can ask us to look further and do more research. This is a team of volunteers behind me who've spent many hours bringing this thus forward to this point, saying this is something we feel really passionate about and feel that it's like the time is now. So there was somebody else.
Yeah. Thanks. Councillor Tate, and then
Thanks so much.
Councillor Lockenberg, and then I'll do one more survey of the room.
I have like a couple comments. One, I think the Cranbrook Social Coordinator, Development Coordinator is a grant funding. That's my understanding. It's UBCM, not taxation based, correct? Well, maybe that's my quick Google search. So a bit of a difference there.
Tate, I think it's funded primarily by the regional district
Okay.
and partly by the city.
And it says UBCM online too.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think they have some
I'm always just aware of exemplars that are brought to us. Often people say, well, in Revelstoke this, and I go, time out, resort municipality. And they'll be like, Fernie, they do this. And I'll be like, whoa, pause, resort municipality. So we have different contexts that I think is really important. For example, when Macola came to us at first, and we were really looking at housing in the community, and they gave us the exemplars of Tofino and I think Fernie that has their own housing entity for the city. And they're saying this is probably the way that municipalities your size are going. And then after a deeper dive, they actually backtracked a little and were like, oh wow, your social sector is just bumping. Like that's going to be duplication, that's going to be extra work for your staff, that's going to take extra years because you already have these groups in place that are doing really good work and they're already organized and ready to go. I agree with Councillor Woodward that we've got ENCO and the Fentanyl Task Force, we've got street outreach, we have all the different overlaps, literally in staff there's overlaps there and like people at the table. And I like the vision of coordination, but I'm curious if the city would be overstepping by becoming a coordinator or a housing entity of groups that are already dialed. And they do have relationships. I'm really careful about being like, we need relationships because it's Nelson. The relationships exist, right? Like we already have a lot of that. So I'm cautious about using that as our premise that we need to build relationships and have these bridges and coordination. And even from your presentation, I'm like listening and I heard you say this was really interesting about them having their own funders and grantors that they need to answer to. And so on that topic, like I would be curious if we had a city staff reaching out to them, they would still have those funders and grantors. And it might be unintentionally the top down that we're trying to avoid. So I'm cautious, and I'm thinking of the housing entity kind of as a parallel. We've got all this rec stuff going on, and I'm imagining if we had a recreation coordinator trying to like do that when there's lots of groups that are already doing the good work that they do, and they do already meet. So while I can see the vision, I don't know that it's right for Nelson. It might be right regionally. It clearly is doing some good work in Penticton, but I don't know what their context was prior to needing it, the way they needed it enough that they went through with it, because I'm still learning, and I know it's 2 years in, but I'm really still learning. And one thing that I have learned is that when the proponents come, they are looking for the epitome, ultimate, best thing that could possibly be. And I just don't know that we can always have that. Sometimes we have really great people doing the really great work, and we can't always go to the best. I actually pulled out my thesaurus, ultimate solution. And so I'm hesitant, and I would not recommend sending this to staff this year. I just think we have too much on our plates, although I like the vision.
Yeah, yes, if I may. I wanted to provide some quick clarification. The resilience coordinator, yes, this is similar to a resilience coordinator, but it's too narrow, as I was saying. For example, what role does youth sports play in terms of community resilience? That's a question for a resilience coordinator. And as it turns out, it's probably quite fundamental. You can't have a resilience community if you don't have healthy, active population. And so that's the kind of broader thinking that I'm talking about that extends beyond the traditional narrow focus, or not that it's narrow, but the traditional focus of the social services sector. And reflecting back to that principle that we tend to focus on where the crises are, rightfully so. However, if we're trying to build long-term solutions, we have to take a whole of community approach that's still quite new as we're grappling with this mode of thinking. But the resilience frameworks that are being developed are very explicit about asking questions about what role does the cultural community play? What role does arts play? How does the emergency management coordinator, what's his role in all of this? And so that's the thing I think we're increasingly missing, and that's where we're going to get the best short, medium, and long-term return on that investment for that role. And it's more likely to be funded. Like, there's a lot of resilience funding out there, both at the federal level, through FCM, at the provincial level. And so if we're likely to get this grant funded, it wouldn't be as a social development coordinator, it would be as a resilience coordinator that is very much explicit about identifying, mapping, identifying the risks and our vulnerabilities, mapping the social sector and the various other components, and then developing a coordinated strategy that benefits the entire community. So that would be my recommendation. I hear you. And my recommendation to staff would be to refer this to staff and loop this in, because in part, I'm agreeing with the urgency of this as well. I think what we're seeing, and Nelson hasn't quite experienced it yet, but we're on the verge of experiencing a whole host of catastrophic risks that we're not prepared for. We don't have the social infrastructure, we don't have the technical infrastructure to deal with it. So as much as we are incredibly busy, I think this is there's a time factor here that has to be considered.
So I want to thank you for coming this afternoon, evening. It gets dark out. I'm like, I think it's still the afternoon. I don't think I have anything to add. I think that most of the councillors have covered it. I do have some the cost and the benefit issues that percolate in my mind. I think Councillor Tate sort of articulated them. I just remember being in a meeting with Phyllis Nash, and just to go back to Councillor Pinero for a moment, that Councillor Gar had tried to hire a coordinator, and they were unsuccessful in actually getting any more grants or revenue, and because they were using a grant to fund that person, that job wasn't continued on, because their social service members there had managed to get the grants that were the grants that were out there, and so that person didn't sort of succeed in their role in that regard, which was somewhat unfortunate, because that would have been a nice community right at hand that had gone ahead to look at this kind of programming. So I just want to thank you for your time, and I'm glad you were able to come now. I'm sorry for the fact that we had to cancel you in November, and now we have this in front of us. So thank you again for your research.
And you also have our email and
your one page.
my
That's
phone number, one
fantastic.
page to continue a conversation, because there's more to answer. I know we had a very short amount of time, but more to answer and address concerns, and there's more conversation there.
Yeah, and it's hard, because in terms of allotment of time, even had you been here in November, your time would have been exactly the same as now. I mean, in terms of time, but perhaps we'll have to have you come back in the springtime again.
Happy to.
Mayor, can I put a motion to refer this to our budget workshop, upcoming budget workshop?
Yeah, if you have a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Page. Councillor Page, did you want to?
Referral? So staff, I just want to check in that staff has heard about reaching out to other local governments. That's part of what I would refer this to staff and to budgets, to go have at least some initial conversations about sharing the cost of a shared role and how that might impact budgets. That might happen at the meeting, it might happen after the meeting, but I think this role sits outside of the city, and we should talk to others.
To me, that's a different referral than referring it to budget.
Okay, well, it's just notes then.
Okay. So we can either refer it to budget or refer it for more exploration, like reaching
Well, I
out
look to you,
to
Rick.
other
Well,
communities.
Can I know you guys are volunteers, but you have many of these relationships. Could you help us with this because I think your community has probably as much capacity as our staff to reach out to the rest of the region so that by the time it comes to our budget workshop, we'll have answers from you to staff about what other.
Can I just stop you there? I mean, we have budget meetings. I'm sorry. I mean,
Friday.
We have budget meetings on Friday. I mean, waiting
Would
for
this
this,
fit within that?
like, it's
Friday's meeting?
we start this process, as
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
I don't know that as we go through this we're not putting this as a budget consideration, I don't think, in like the last week of February, but we are starting, I just want to keep in mind that we are starting budget as of, like, even more discussions starting this Friday. So if you want to refer, like, figure out what you guys want to refer, budget discussion with, I'm hearing Councillor Page say,
Yeah.
he's got some considerations, but I mean, do you want a second budget, or do you feel that you don't want to be the seconder of that?
Okay. I don't want to just send it to budget unless we're going to have those conversations. But if we need to send it to budget to have more conversations, I support that. But I'm already ready to let's start talking to other local governments and see if anyone else is interested, and then have a
Well,
conversation.
that doesn't prevent us from doing that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it does.
No, so I'm agreeing with you wholeheartedly. I'm just trying to figure out the mechanics of this, and given the time and the capacities and all these other things.
Yeah,
What I
I'm
would
not
s-
sure if we're gonna get, everyone's in their budget discussions, everyone. I'm
Yeah.
not sure other
Also-
communities are in a position to,
I'm just
gonna
one-
tell it. If I go to these other communities, I'm pretty certain they're going, not in our budget discussions at this time.
Yeah.
This is 2025.
Yeah,
Is
that's
this
what I
something
think- that's what I
people
see
are
too.
interested?
Yeah.
It's not gonna meet our
I
budget.
think part of why I'm saying we should just refer this to budget is because I do imagine, and I've heard it, I've seen it, there are funding opportunities for this to be grant funded. If it's got the right frame and it's give it the right mandate. So the budget implications, I know we can't commit to that, so that'll be a bigger conversation that we'll have at the workshop. We can't.
Yeah, all I wanted to add is if we think there's grant funding out there and you want to allocate staff resources to pursue that or whatever, that's not necessarily a decision you have to make at budget, because there's no taxation impact to that. We're going to go try to find a grant and we're going to incur an expenditure. We can amend financial plans to include both in the future, so that pressure of getting this
The budget.
at a budget is probably not, if you're looking at trying to find grants to fund it. If you're looking for our own money to fund any of it, then it's definitely a budget discussion.
Yeah, I guess just what I'm trying to get to clarity so I can actually get the motion defined. The reason why I'm saying to a budget discussion is because no grant is guaranteed, and I do believe in the ROI on this. I think that we would come out net positive if we just looked at it narrowly through a financial lens. I think there is all sorts of benefits, and it'd be hard to exactly itemize them because they might happen over years, but nevertheless, I still believe that. And so if we didn't get the grant, I still think that this is an important role that we've been lacking. At the same time, I also believe that there's very likely that it would be grant funded. So although we have to make space in the budget for it, I think we'd make up that gap. So that's why I'm saying to refer it to the budget.
Okay, so we got the simple referral here to refer to the budget. I don't really have a seconder yet. I know that Councillor Payne is going to second, and she also wants to comment, so I'm going to Payne.
Good.
My guess is she's going to second it.
I
Sorry,
will
my
second.
assumption.
The other thing I want to bring forward is last year, during a budget discussion, we did agree to put $10,000 toward the analysis of this concept. What work has been done around that thus far? Because I don't think anything has come back to the table on that. Right. So this is my concern in light of the urgency that I see. This is an upstream solution to what we are experiencing every day in every sector of our society. The entire community is listed here as who will be involved. To me, it doesn't matter what you want to call it. This is a time where a level of bold leadership is required for the well-being of our community. So I will second it to move forward so that we can have those future discussions, and in the interim, the possibility of finding some granting opportunities to combine with all of the other amazing work we do to make our community a better place.
Call the question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to stop this now.
Yeah.
Just because now we're starting to debate. Okay, we're referring this to a budget. We're not putting this in the budget. We're referring to a budget discussion.
It's already in the budget. I mean,
So, Councillor Woodward, I'm very sensitive of time
I
here,
know.
Council. We've got a motion on the floor.
Okay.
Speaking to the motion, Councillor Woodward. To referral.
I can't, I'm sorry, I can't support this until this group comes and talks to our staff on what we're already doing. If that work hasn't been done, then it feels like there could be all kinds of overlap. I really need to see this group come and talk to our staff. What is our staff doing already? What kind of communications are already happening? I know our staff works with social sector groups all the time, so I really would like to see that work done first, so that we're not spending a whole bunch of money on what's already happening.
So, Councillor Woodward, once again, sorry.
Sorry,
Thank you.
that's-
I'm just going to remind you, we are not having a debate
Thank you.
on whether or
Sorry.
not we're funding this position. This position will go along with all the other myriad of asks that we have had in the course of the year that get brought along, that will be part of our budget discussions. And we will see what the outcome is during the budget time. And it could be that it's exactly what you're asking for is where we land in budget, or we might land somewhere else. Councillor Pinero.
Just echoing, similar concerns about redundancy, but I think that might come up in a conversation, right? At the budget conversation, we have access to staff, so we can ask staff what they're already doing, and we can come up with have a fulsome conversation at that time about where those redundancies may or may not lie.
And that is
Right.
the whole
Am I
purpose of why
wrong?
we have budget
Yeah,
discussions.
okay.
You're not
Thank you.
wrong. It's the whole purpose of why we have budgetary discussions and why these things often get referred to that time. This has been moved and seconded to refer further discussion around this to budget. It's just that simple. It's got a bow on it right now. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, and that carries.
Thank you for your time.
thank you so much.
Okay, and here we are. Oh my lord, we are really now behind the eight
Yeah.
ball here. Okay, sorry. But I'd like to call up Chief Librarian Tracy Theron to provide with the overview of the Nelson Public Library future needs assessment to
It's on now.
council
You just turned it on.
and to address any questions that may be coming up. So this is not pertaining to budget. This is their current needs assessment. Are we good? Did people need a break? No, there is no, sorry, there is no time for break. Sorry, because we're behind. Sorry.
Oh, well, here, Keith, can you pass those out? I'm not sure if these were part of your package, so this is just a one
pager?
summary from Selkirk College's report.
And I'd like to also welcome Annie, who's the chair of the library, who's going to sit down next to Tracy, who's the chief librarian.
Thanks.
Oh, here you go. One right there. Yeah.
Here's your report. That when you do the tabs, that'd be
Oh, wait a minute, do we?
yeah. Sure. Yeah. Great. A little bit bigger would be super. Sorry. Whoops. Be right there, just getting our notes together. That's good.
Does that sound okay?
As long as,
Both on.
Well, before we start, I'd like to introduce also Laura Harris, our Assistant Chief Librarian at the back, wearing our cool hats.
Incognito.
Incognito. And she contributed to our presentation tonight. Thanks for the opportunity to share the results of our needs assessment completed in October. Today's presentation will be a summary of the results, a recommended next steps that have helped drive our budget for 2025, along with our future work plans. We appreciate the funding the city provided for the completion of this study.
Excuse me.
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry, Annie. Not a very good.
So how did we get to this point? The library prioritizes community input and being a community responsive service. In 2022, when we were developing a new strategic framework, community engagement was prioritized. We also took a new approach. We asked what values the community felt should be driving the library's priorities. Using that approach and the information we gathered allows staff to be nimble in response to unexpected opportunities and challenges. Since 2022, we've been tracking our progress using metrics based on community surveys. And this fall, we received over 500 responses in 3 weeks for an 8-minute-long survey. So the people are engaged. In 2023, we also saw a big jump in usage stats: circulation, visits, public computer usage, Wi-Fi logins, memberships, and program attendance. We were cautious about using these statistics as a trajectory to predict growth, as it could have been a response coming out of COVID. The good news is this year we've seen steady growth over last year, though not the volume that we saw in 2023. Engagement and usage statistics help us paint a clearer picture of the changing needs of the community. Libraries traditionally have provided transactional services. People come in, find a book, a piece of information they need, borrow and leave. But libraries now are more of an interactional service. People are still coming in, but they're staying longer and interacting with space, staff, and others. People are using the library as a space to work, as a meeting place, tutoring, and a social space for all ages. Transactions are still happening, but as our stats demonstrate, more of the growth in transactions are taking place online. Increased usage of digital collections, ebooks, movies, streaming services, such. And lastly, what we're experiencing in Nelson is similar to other rural and urban communities, provincially, nationally, and internationally. As technology, environment, demographics, and social needs are changing, we felt a study providing a long-range vision, incorporating data that we don't normally consult, would benefit long-term planning and respond more accurately to community needs. Which led us to this current study. The aim of the research is to help develop plans for the library that will effectively meet the future needs of our community members, future being next year and 30 years from now. The main deliverables of the study are listed here. Libraries are going in lots of directions, depending on community needs, as you know, because every community is unique. So what we really wanted to do was learn what trends are applicable here, what best practices make sense for us to apply, given the realities of our community. In addition to wanting to navigate sectoral trends, we asked the research team to foster a productive community consultation, engaging users and non-users, groups and organizations surrounding the needs of the library.
Thanks, Annie. So let's dig into some of those results. The first set of data that the researchers looked at was more our local demographics. So, and they did that in order to help us really apply a local lens to this project. So some facts that pertain to the library and services include household incomes, which are lower than our national and provincial levels. Education, 28% of our community has a post-secondary education, thank you. And the same amount have high school diplomas. We're seeing that the percentage of English language speakers are decreasing in the Nelson area, but they're staying about the same level in our rural areas. 5% of our residents identify with Indigenous heritage, 15% are immigrants or non-permanent residents. And if we look a little bit closer at our library membership, 66% of Nelson residents belong to the library. In our regional areas, 41% of they're in Area F, 25% in H South, and 20% in Area E. So the next slide here just looks at our current context. So researchers identified peer libraries in BC based on service population. So this information compiled here looks at Nelson-specific statistics and also statistics from those 7 other libraries. So the table on the left side looks at usage, facility, and open hours to really help paint an overall picture of the service we're providing in the community. You'll note that we have an above average number of card holders compared to other peer libraries. Our level of usage, the relative value of different types of services to the community has shifted in recent years. Like Annie talked about, that transactional and interactional services. So while total circulation of all our materials has actually increased over 5 years, circulation of print materials has decreased, demonstrating a rising interest in electronic resources. But over that same period of time, the number of people accessing wireless internet services at the library increased more than twofold. When we look at our facility, it's about 13,000 square feet of total usable space dedicated to the library, which is average among our peer libraries. Though, as the table demonstrates, it has below average use for the public use space. So this may have to do with our facility being shared with the police department, right? All the mechanical items like boilers, HVAC, electrical systems are all located in the library. So, and in BC, facilities that have been built in the last 15 years are getting bigger. On average, they're approximately 0.9 square feet per serviced area rather than 0.6, because people are planning for growth, right? And they're designing libraries to meet the current needs of library users. So they're more than just people sitting and reading quietly. Our service population is difficult to nail down. Researchers struggled to quantify this because whether folks have cards or not, they use the library and they go to attend library events. So our service population that we're using here is defined by the province, and it includes, of course, the City of Nelson and RD areas South H and F. Though we know that folks that live outside of these boundaries in Area E, per se, see the Nelson Library as their home library. So there's really no way to know what percentage of people using resources are members. Libraries are thus finding this number increasingly meaningful and rely more on the number of visits and the number of people attending programs. So compared to peer libraries, Nelson's 2023 revenue profile was more dependent on grants and other sources and less dependent on local government contributions. But we'll elaborate more on funding recommendations shortly. But interesting to note here that our current funding it's just of note up here about our current funding, that comparing bit. Oops. So the next slide here talks about change drivers, and the researchers consulted local research plans and policies to identify factors that could drive change in the Nelson area and affect the future needs of the community regarding library services. So the following themes were identified: climate change, not surprisingly, right? And we don't need to tell you that the climate crisis will necessitate more free indoor public spaces. For locals, of course, but also for tourists when outdoor attractions are limited due to smoky skies from forest fires. And many new libraries now are being built as tourist destinations. Affordability. Again, you don't need to crunch the numbers in this study to know that life here is less affordable, and folks are increasingly relying on libraries as free spaces, but also for resources like our new food preservation library or our upcoming tool library. Social well-being. Our library is never going to replace social services for our community. However, programs and events and spaces foster community connection and access to accurate information about both resources and social issues will be increasingly important roles for our library. And I would like just interject and talk about resiliency, right? I think this is what libraries help communities do, be resilient in all sorts of different ways, whether it's health or education. Polarization. We've seen the impacts of polarization in our area, right, firsthand, whether it's hosting a drag story time at the library or adopting a climate action plan. Inclusivity and access. Identified barriers included opening hours, parking, transit, and our library website. Lack of transit was especially noted for out-of-towners and folks with lower income. Inclusivity, just to note, was also identified as a core policy direction for the City of Nelson in the revised OCP. Economic shifts. Nelson traditionally relied on recreation tourism, but due to climate impacts, there's a need to diversify, which may include bolstering arts and culture and heritage sectors. These changes will impact the makeup of our potential library partners. As well, there's an influx of remote workers seeking social connections and synchronous work or meeting places. The next slide here is about trends. So researchers gathered information on how libraries across North America are being affected by social, cultural, economic, and environmental trends. And these are the themes that they identified. Cross-sectoral initiatives are increasingly strategies used by libraries. Examples include collaboration with tourism, education, business, and arts and culture sectors that have mandates that overlap with libraries. Co-location is another way that benefits both libraries and other organizations through cost savings and also boosting foot traffic through those organizations. We know that libraries play a crucial role in by providing free access to technology and education on using new tools. And libraries are training and supporting workers with small businesses. Our community survey found that patrons are increasingly looking for support using technology, which aligns with also with national trends. So, changing nature of partners. As technology continues to evolve, so do the needs of and behaviors of our library users. So for example, Gen Z and Gen Alpha, though digital natives, need support with identifying misinformation and disinformation. And digital natives are also knowledge creators and entrepreneurial learners. So this means that traditional library layouts need to include more meeting spaces and more creation spaces, just like we have already at the Nelson Library's Tech Hub. As that community demographic shifts, the population will be more heavily weighted to the 30 and 60-year-olds. And we observe that Gen Alpha, those who were born after 2010, really make up a large portion of our visitors at the library between 3 and 6 o'clock in the afternoon. Libraries as social commons. So we know that libraries are evolving and they're no longer just book repositories. And the Nelson Public Library, demonstrates that it is a vibrant place where people can gather, combating social isolation, and space to share ideas and connect with others. Libraries are supporting citizen science projects and civic engagement initiatives. As one of the few free public spaces, libraries really are that critical community infrastructure. partnering to support social services. So in response to climate change and increasing social needs, libraries have stepped up to support the well-being of our community. An example in Nelson is being a cooling center and providing smoke-free places during wildfire season. Lastly, funding. As you're aware, BC Public Libraries are predominantly funded through local government. Other funding includes a yearly provincial operating grant that's remained stagnant for over 12 years now, and of course funds from fundraising and other community grants. So really, this data points to libraries increasingly becoming a critical community infrastructure and the limits of funding sources to respond effectively to that role. Nelson's forthcoming OCP recognizes the critical infrastructure our library provides to its community and commits to funding the library sustainably. To meet the needs of new generations, library services and spaces are required to adapt.
Because the library does a thorough job of engaging library users, we asked researchers to prioritize non-users, targeting geographic areas and groups and organizations. The themes that emerged included reaching out to rural residents. Those residents were unaware of the full extent of services due to an outdated misconception of what the library offered. They also expressed frustration with hours and lack of seating to use as a place to connect with others while they're in town. Another theme that evoked was the need to actively include racialized residents. A gap in outreach and marketing to culturally specific groups were identified. Calling in young adults. Similar to rural residents, young adults were unaware of the variety of services offered and suggested more social events, providing a free public space for this age group to gather. Partnering with new sectors. Arts, culture, business, and education sectors were underrepresented in their engagement with the library. Barriers identified were lack of awareness of library resources and unclear on how to initiate collaborations. Though barriers were identified, there is enthusiasm about developing these partnerships. And lastly, aligning with city policies and programs. City staff identified the potential for alignment with the OCP and city policies and values, including creating a welcoming and compassionate community with diverse representation. Other comments included the library's role in supporting and providing opportunities for civic engagement and support the city's efforts in responding to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action. After analyzing all the data, the results were compiled by the researchers into 4 emerging themes. Under human resources, the study identified specific areas requiring increasing staffing hours. These new staff hours are needed to support ongoing and expanded digital literacy programs, increase our capacity to reach non-library users to build awareness of library services and learn the needs of these groups. Increased hours will provide services that, 1, improve access for underrepresented populations by improving outreach, extending hours, and enhancing remote services. Secondly, advance strategic partnerships, such as those with the business community around their staff training needs, or with early childhood educators requiring resources and organizations and businesses that serve newcomers in our community. Thirdly, to confirm the new hours would confirm the library's role as a leader in community priorities. Partner with other civic literacy proponents to co-create more informed and engaged citizens. With more staff hours, programs that encourage civic engagement will help diminish polarization and facilitate the exchange of accurate information. And lastly, services that demonstrate the library's role as an essential service, refuge for extreme weather, and shelter for vulnerable populations. How it's used, and what it looks like was a major facility theme across all forms of the research. The library is recognized as an important community commons, and Nelson area residents want more from the space. 3 focus areas were addressed: a new facility, utilization of existing space, and climate resilience. Community members and staff shared many aligned visions for what a library could look like in the future. Some of the themes that researchers heard repeatedly included more conversational seating, separate quiet areas, bookable meeting and event spaces, enhanced integration with the outdoors, and improved access, including parking. Many of these needs cannot be met in our existing facility given its location and space constraints. The city and library previously worked with an architect to develop a proposal for a new facility next to the City Hall that included many aspects that reflect the community needs. While this proposal was not funded, it was recommended we continue to explore opportunities to develop a new facility. Whether or not new facility is planned, there may be opportunities to reassess how space is utilized at the current facility in order to make room for limited community needs. And given the realities of the climate crisis, the City of Nelson's climate action targets, and patrons' interest in seeing how the library shows climate leadership, any facility, whether new or old, should incorporate climate action measures. And lastly, funding. The report provides a benchmark for local government funding from peer libraries, and it demonstrated that Nelson falls short at both the municipal and regional district levels, though more so from the regional district. The report provided context for discussions with local government partners about fair and sustainable future funding. 3 other focus areas are reassessing the provincial grant calculation model, expanding pathways to philanthropy and fundraising, and exploring new revenue streams in a new facility.
Thanks. So the next few slides, we want to outline immediate actions, some of which may have some budget implications for 2025. We've budgeted for continued tech training for community members. Currently, the costs for implementing these programs are precariously funded through grants. As a clear future need, this will be moved to our operating budget. We're working towards website improvements, and staff continue to develop their tech skills utilizing a one-time provincial grant to do so. In order to dedicate staff time towards strategic partnerships and outreach into the community, and to those that aren't currently using the library, there are minor changes that we can make to staffing. The first of these is adjusting how library staff, how we staff the public service desk when 2 of our full-time folks are on holiday, which combined is about 13 weeks. So calling in on-call staff for all of their hours rather than relying on department coordinators to cover hours on the desk will give at least another 104 hours back to coordinators. Our department coordinators are our highest level paid employees, and they're replacing our lowest level paid employees for that vacation period and sick time. So the second staffing change may surprise you, but 3 out of 5 of our department coordinators don't actually have full-time hours. So bringing them up to 35 hours per week increases our human resources by 312 hours, which will be earmarked for partnership and outreach activities targeting listed demographic populations listed here. Opening with a skeleton staff on Sundays is remarkably inexpensive because there would be staff by our part-time or on-call staff members. So the next slide. So a facility. Immediate actions also include evaluating how our existing space is being utilized. We'll aim to make more conversational spaces to address community feedback and library trends. So this project could be addressed through fundraising efforts to purchase new mobile shelving and furniture, similar to what we did in the lower level in the kids section. Revisiting the plan the city initiated in 2021 and developing a campaign with our stakeholders for a multi-use facility. and work with the city's facility folks and the climate department to identify and improve operational building efficiencies, including upgrades to reduce emissions associated with building operations and improve the resiliency of the building to anticipated climate change impacts.
As mentioned, Nelson falls short at both the municipal and regional district levels, though more so, as we said, from the regional district. Hence, we'll be advocating for increased local government contributions in our future budget discussions, and we look forward to those conversations. The Provincial Library Partners Group has successfully advocated for increased funding for the last 3 years in the form of one-time special grants. That has supported a number of capital projects in the library and pilot projects, including the tech training for the community. The partners are continuing their advocacy efforts to secure sustained increases. The Library Board shares this messaging with MLA Anderson, and we really appreciate council and city staff efforts with the Premier and ministers. The board recently launched a legacy campaign sharing information with potential donors and financial and estate planners on the benefit of donating to the library. We'll continue to promote this. And we're also engaging with the Friends of the Library to expand our fundraising efforts. Lastly, the report mentions the possibility of revenue streams in a new facility, such as room rentals and other shared spaces.
Thanks, Annie. So, a picture really is worth 1,000 words. And so this report provided a lot of data in the form of numbers and text, and we thought this photo really provided a visual of some of that data. So you'll see that there are 4 desks in this office, and actually Laura is taking the picture because she can't concentrate on her work because of everything that's going on in this office. So Heather Joy, who isn't there, who normally sits at that empty desk, she is our tech and administrative service coordinator, and she's upstairs actually covering the front desk because Shauna is away on holidays. Jackie, our children's librarian to the left, she's identifying a number of early reader books and leveling them so families can look for specific reading levels and that they can be more easily identified to help their kids or their grandkids learn how to read. Lindsay in the back left is sitting behind Laura's desk, and she's meeting with her public service team to do a debrief after a stressful incident that took place upstairs. Helen in the front right there is preparing new books to be added to the shelves. So every item that we receive, every book needs to be unpacked, labeled, shelved. Normally you'll see lots of stacks of boxes on the floors or in book carts in this room as well. And of course, we used panorama to take this picture because the room is much smaller than it actually looks. So what may not be totally obvious in this photo is our resourcefulness in finding solutions and working with what we have. And what is obvious, though, is issues with both space and how we currently cover our vacation plan, our vacation coverage plan. So just this last Monday, our board passed the 2025 budget that addresses some of the report's immediate recommendations and also responds to community feedback that the library has heard over a number of years. So for less than an additional full-time equivalent, the proposed 2025 budget supports Sunday openings, which provides an additional 416 open hours to our community. And using 2023 stats, that could mean an approximate 300 more visits a week to the library, or an additional 15,600 visits in a year. And adding more sick and vacation coverage will free up department coordinators to do more work in their pay grade. They'll have an extra 455 hours for outreach and building strategic community partnerships, supporting arts and cultural organizations, small businesses, and newcomers. They'll be able to increase library events and programmings to support those organizations. An additional 109 tech support hours will be available to the community as well. So if you're going to remember one thing from this presentation, let it be this, that libraries help make life more affordable, and there is an incredible return on investment in funding libraries. At the Nelson Library in 2023, library expenses were approximately $112,000 per month. Expenses offset by library users is approximately $800,000 a month. So this amount is money that they've saved by checking out a book instead of buying one, by renting library space rather than renting co-working space, by attending a tech class at the library instead of paying a tutor, by using our public computers and our printer and our Wi-Fi rather than subscribing for monthly subscriptions. So all of this has increased library services means increased affordability, and the return on investment is over $7 for every $1 invested in our library. So research shows that municipalities invest in facilities and organization that enable people to engage with art and culture and heritage, like a public library, improves community health and quality of life. So, and we all know this is a priority for the city of Nelson.
So in closing, we've spent many years imagining, building a wish list of what we could do if we had more space and revenue to meet growing demands. Now we have an evidence-based data that supports our vision. We look forward to collaborating with the City Council and staff to bring these visions to reality, to create a public library that the community continues to be proud of and a destination for visitors alike. We're immensely grateful for this local, regional, and provincial data, but also the global trends that will help us develop plans for the library that will effectively meet the future needs of the community members. Future being next year and 30 years from now. So thanks, and we appreciate hearing your feedback on the report and answering questions.
Thank you so much, Annie and Tracy. So, Council, do you have any questions? Councillor Page.
Thank you. Always appreciate these updates on what you guys are doing and your values-based strategic planning. I'm curious, in the context of our previous presentation on item number 3, developing the library's role as a provider of social supports, and wanted you to flesh out a little bit more commentary on what you guys are seeing within the facility, what you understand other libraries in the area are seeing as you push towards supporting the well-being of the most vulnerable populations. And how much did your board budget to improve those areas, if you have a number?
Right.
I don't know if that number's broken down, but for that, but certainly we see, I mean, Tracy can speak to the daily interactions and how the library supports the social well-being. Do you want to comment on that?
Well, trends, right? I think the trends we can see in the streets, in local businesses, things that you're experiencing maybe when you're walking down Baker Street. We're obviously seeing that in the library. Recently at a department head meeting, I don't know why I mentioned it, but I said it's been a little quieter at the library. And then these last maybe 5-6 days, we've had to call emergency services 3 times. People unresponsive in the library, somebody passed out in a washroom in the library, somebody stretched out, books all over the place, just, yeah, not in a good space, not wanting to leave. So yeah, those are things we're seeing in the library. We have a good relationship with our street outreach folks. We pick up the phone, and if they can answer, right, if they're not busy, they do pick up the phone and they're there right away for us, as well as our our neighbors, the police. They're supportive as well. I think the library is there as a support to social service organizations, and we're there to serve everybody in the community, right? I think the board has given the staff the direction as well, is that we're not there to replace any social service organizations, but we are there to support people, right? And that's in all sorts of ways. Does that answer your question, Keith?
Yeah, well, when we're looking at continuing to develop the library's role as a provider of social supports, explore opportunities to collaborate with social services, augment existing supports for vulnerable populations.
Yeah.
That to me reads like there's some sort of consideration of a budgetary
Yeah.
allocation.
So this study was, Selkirk College's study and their research and their recommended next steps,
Fair,
right?
fair.
And they, as we did, we asked them to engage with non-users and different organizations and different groups.
Right.
And that's, their takeaway is from that engagement, but they didn't engage the social sector, right?
Okay.
So this is how the community sees the library.
Okay.
In directions and.
I apologize, I do see the logo at the bottom.
Yeah, so, yeah, that's fine. But so I think, in larger communities like Edmonton and London, Ontario, and some library in New Brunswick, they do have a social service worker on staff. Those are larger facilities, larger buildings, larger communities where they have the space to deliver the correct care for those individuals, right? And if you come to the library, there'd be no space to do that in our library.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's our role at the Nelson Public Library in this facility.
Yeah, okay, great.
Yeah, I think the point is not to duplicate the services
Oh, of
as we
course not.
talked earlier,
Yeah.
but that there is a role, thinking about the role of the social development coordinator, how that person would integrate with the library and the staff, for sure. That's
Yeah.
one of the stakeholders.
How that support goes both ways.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
that wraparound support that
Yep.
we're one of the providers, I suppose.
Councillor Pinero and then Councillor Payne.
Yeah, just maybe a comment on that exchange there. Like in our last presentation, there was a reference to social development and social issues and sort of a downstream and upstream approach, right? Where, there's social services that respond to crises and there's social services that prevent crises. And I think we can't mitigate how much the library means to that upstream component of that. So that's where I see the social, obviously we're pivoting a little bit to respond to the reality of what we're dealing with every day. And I applaud all of your efforts in that direction. It's awesome. But it doesn't take away from the value of the library as a upstream service for those same social services before they become a crisis. So I see it more as an upstream service for sure. And I think that's traditionally what a library, that role is traditionally what a library fills, but it is a service to the community in that way. So just to point out that you guys, well, you may be doing extra in that other sort of crisis response kind of role. It doesn't take away from the role that the library is more built for as well, right?
Yeah, related to that is the role of the library in providing information out to the community and education. So there's a role for that, creating more awareness of the social developments and say the social developments of health, say, so that we have that role for providing education to help decrease polarization and misinformation.
Councillor Payne, Woodward, then Lockenberg.
I think one of the key things that I would add to that is adding the Sunday service and increasing the outreach are also opportunities to broaden whatever, you don't need to call it social services, but just that opportunity for people to have a safe, warm, environmentally protected place to go at all points during the week. I think the Sunday, especially for people coming from rural areas, may have been a barrier. I can't remember the exact details of the report. It's been a while since I read it, but I think just those extended hours are a way that you have creatively opened up that opportunity as well.
Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just looking at your funding models here and expanding pathways to philanthropy and fundraising. I'm curious, what I don't see there is that, large corporate local organizations have been approached.
For donations sort of thing,
No,
or
for
names?
ongoing funding considering, like, I don't want to name names, I'm not going to name, but there are very large local corporate organizations that do global business, and they're very interested in supporting our local community, and they want to be good local corporate citizens. And I mean, I'm not trying to privatize libraries, but from the last presentation and this presentation, I'm really feeling these cost pressures, and taxation on our citizenry can only go so far, and granting from our provincial and federal funders can only go so far. We can only squeeze so much, and then we run into that wall. So I'm wondering if that has been a consideration approached.
I think the part of that would come from some of our outreach from the board level as well as the staff level in those communications to develop those relationships, say with the business sector that we haven't normally done, that might lead to some partnerships. Having said that, Tracy can help me out here, was that we want to be careful that the library is seen as a welcoming place for all and not perceived to be privatized, I suppose, like you, or one particular business supports an aspect of the library that isn't holistic, for lack of a better word, you know what I mean?
I totally know what you mean. I just feel like there's this constant rising up of costs, and we feel it in the city all the time.
For sure.
And so I just wonder, like, do we have to think about different ways of funding? And I really am concerned about how far we can push our citizens in taxation, and we are. It's a challenge.
Yeah, yeah. That's why I think the return on investment is an important factor to consider in this. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Jesse.
Councillor Lochner.
I'll be very, very quick. The one thing that jumped out at me that I want to flag as a new perspective that maybe you haven't heard yet, or maybe you have, but I just want to reinforce it then, is this notion that we need to cater to young people, these digital natives, and provide services for them related to, social media, like the green screen, the tech room, and that kind of thing. I would argue we need to go exactly in the opposite direction. Lately, I've been going into the library quite a bit. My daughter often goes there after school, and you go into the teen area, they're all on their phones. They're all on their phones. You walk past, people are playing video games. Like, I would remove, if anything, computers and make it a no screen space at the risk of, having a whole bunch of kids not be there and focus more on inner development work, for example. This notion that the library is a hub for information and a sort of a nexus of information and where you need to go to get information, and almost deifying information and knowledge in that sort of information, knowledge as information structure is, I think, we need to transcend. And so I just wanted to point out, because I know it's in various strategies and the investments you're making. Like I said, just as an alternate view, I'd say we go in the complete opposite direction.
Yeah, I think, research also shows that that age group too are reading less online and stuff, and they rather come into a space like a library or bookstore and browse the shelves and stuff, and people are looking for those digital detox spaces as well. And we have some plans for that too. The only thing, I think, if we potentially drop technology like that, there are some folks that don't have access to technology, right? So we want to make sure that people can still access technology and have the skills to be able to do that. And as well, technology is what brings some of those age groups together too. So they might be sitting there all on their phone, but it's a welcoming space for them just to walk through the door. But it's so interesting, right? So, very interesting. Thanks, Rick.
Councillor Tate.
Yeah, just a quick one. You mentioned some of the challenges you've had over the last couple weeks and ongoing everywhere. And I would say like any building that has an unlocked door is experiencing those things. So while there's pressure on your folks and your staff, there's pressure on all of the folks and all of the staffs. So that just really resonates with me. Another thing, this is just an observation on slide 7, how only the one bullet point has an adjective. I'm like, wait a second. It just really like blinked to me. Just very interesting. You gave a lot of context in terms of the budget and pieces with your voices that I wasn't able to like pull out because the 72-page report isn't really the budget asks.
No.
And so I was curious if you would be able to have like a little one-pager with the budget asks, because I heard like, I was like trying to write it down like 414 hours and then like 125 hours. And I was like, tell me more, but I didn't see it.
So they weren't coming here to talk about the budget.
Budget.
Oh, okay.
We're not here to talk. That's why I started off with, and then they did kind of dive into the budget, and I was trying to give them the evil eye and sort of like,
did you not
you're talking about the budget.
I think they were.
That's why there's no firm numbers. This is a workshop. This is because we've been waiting, and unfortunately, and I'm to blame for some of this, is when the delegation list gets super long, I go, who can we put off for a little while?
They're so
Unfortunately,
we're so
the library has been put off, as was Nelson by its best. So it's good to hear this before, like everything. It's good to hear their ideas before we get to budget. But we will see budget, not today.
Okay, no problem.
The intent to include part of the budget was because it's part of the action items as.
This is why I was getting a little muddled, because I saw the 8 next steps from
Give you
Selkirk.
some teasers.
You're right, but then they're not really like recommended anywhere in the report. So I was just trying to make sense of like what you were saying versus what this one pager said versus the 72-page report.
I get it.
No problem.
Sorry, we confused you.
Nope. Easily confused sometimes. Thanks. I really love that you engaged our local college. It just goes to show the other wonderful things that Selkirk College does. I'm with you on the conundrum of how our spaces are leaning into helping folks on the entire spectrum and then the social service aspect of it, but then also those little tidbits of, but we're not trained for this, and is it welcoming for everybody? And so there's a real, I don't want to call it it could be a dissonance. There's a dissonance in our hearts of trying to do all the things and in our scope of what we should be doing. It's tough. It's government. It's tough. But thank you. Thanks for trying to articulate it.
Okay, good.
So, seeing nothing else, I just want to thank you for coming and doing the report, and I'm sorry for having bumped you, I think, actually more than once, if I was to reflect in my mind as we go through these. I mean, who knew so many people wanted to always come and talk at delegation time to the city council? But thank you again. I think the library is a wonderful place, and you are many things to many people. And you know, it's not, I don't think it's lost on any of us around the table about the fact that a new library would be a wonderful addition to the city of Nelson. And I applaud you on the fact that you continue to make every inch of your library usable while we wait either for some perhaps miracle, but you know, it's not like we don't ever think about it. I just want you to be assured that, and Councillor Pinero is very good at reminding us, as that's your number one act. He's sometimes quiet over there, but we know that he's delivered the message about the facility. So, and make sure that you're doing the facility, and I'm sure that you've got it there, the recreation facility opportunity there, because I think that, again, we're reimagining the recreation campus. There's lots of building there, and perhaps not necessarily a library, but something. I don't want to even put it out there because there'll be somebody phoning me later on that's watching saying you're giving away recreation space, but
Yeah, it
you know,
came to my mind too.
yeah, I think it is. It's in the definition of recreation as library. And I recall, I've been around long enough, maybe some of the people in the back of the room have been around long enough. when the library was in the Civic Center.
Yes.
So, you never know what could happen, but I love the idea that you have Library Imagine. So thank you for coming.
Well, and thank you, and I don't know if we're even allowed to do this. Can we give you gifts?
No.
It's not the
Swag.
library.
No. Oh, I want one of those. Oh, I love that hat.
Yeah.
That's great. So
Kate,
thank
you're
you
not
so
taking
much.
one? Is that what you're saying?
So I'm gonna ask for
That's really cool.
recess. I hope nobody's offended that we're not doing city manager's report. Do any councillors have reports that they're dying to give at this particular?
Well,
have
it's
dinner, don't
a, it's
Yeah,
a city
we have to have dinner.
facility,
No, I
so
just
it's
want to know
okay.
whether or not I have to put that on after dinner because it's still a full agenda. If everybody
And,
is sort of okay without having a report to give.
Oh,
I thought one of the I thought one of the criteria of getting the funding to go to Housing Central was to do a report, but I can do a written report if you prefer.
Yes.
I've already created it for the Housing Committee, so.
Okay, yeah, maybe if we do that, then
Fine.
then we can just then jump right in. If nobody, I don't see anybody else saying that they've got a good report. So if you can then, give a written report.
Should we
that'll
get a
be
group photo with the?
Oh, and can we have I need a motion to recess. Councillor Tate, Councillor Woodward, all those in favor of recess.
Councillor Page has your hat.
And I was gonna say, I don't have a hat. Oh. How did that work?
got one for you.
Recess.
I feel like I can't
Before,
talk to
can you
him
just hang on
anymore,
there for a
which is a
second?
downside for me.
Well, because I don't know about.
That's me.
My stuff away.
We're just gonna
I don't need for showing.
turn the tap.
With my ruler. Put it on my desk.
You're gonna give the orange guy what he wants.
I was thinking like Trans-Columbia River Universal Management Plan.
Is that the 10 o'clock CDC tone to tell me that we're now live?
Yeah.
Do you know where your children is, or am I disabled?
Figure if we just give him the name, he'll give us
Okay.
anything we want.
Where your
Okay,
children are,
everybody.
would be proper.
We are back to this last regular meeting of, okay, maybe not. The emergency code is sounding. Our last regular meeting for 2024. It's hard to believe that we're already at the end of the year. And if I could have a motion to reconvene, please. Moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Tate. All those in favor, opposed, and that carries. Thank you, Council. We're going to move in to item number 12. And that is the Code of Conduct. So this request is for council to adopt the City of Nelson Code of Conduct Bylaw number 3613, 2024. The bylaw establishes clear principles and expectations for the conduct of members of the council, advisory body members, and appointees. The bylaw aims to promote integrity, respect, and accountability among officials representing the city. As you know, council, we have had a couple of meetings on this. Last month, we did go through first 3 readings, and so tonight we are at adoption.
I'll move.
Okay, moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Tate. Councillor Woodward.
That the City of Nelson Code of Conduct Bylaw number 3613, 2024 be finally adopted.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any comments or concerns, councillors? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes unanimously. Just want to recognize the effort that was put in by all of staff, our legal counsel and counsel, that I think these are never easy things. We see that the lack of code of conduct in many jurisdictions continues to be problematic, and weak ones probably even more problematic than not having a code of conduct at all. So I think that we've done an excellent job here, and that no doubt other communities will be reaching out to take a look at our code of conduct. So thank you again. Moving on to 12B. Is the rescinding of the Curling Club lease bylaw. The Nelson Curling Club and the City of Nelson have mutually agreed to terminate the lease for the Curling Club. As a matter of housekeeping, staff requires Nelson Curling Club bylaw 3620, 2024 be rescinded. Council has passed first 3 readings and are now being requested to adopt the bylaw to rescind Curling Club lease bylaw number 3620, 2024.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Page, seconded by Councillor Tate. Councillor Page.
That the bylaw to rescind curling club lease bylaw number 3620202024 be finally adopted.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any concerns or questions, councillors? Seeing none, all in favor, and that carries. Moving on to 12C, Hydro Service Urban Rates. On September 25th, 2024 and October 25th, 2024, Nelson Hydro presented to council with regards to its 2025 budget and the corresponding need for annual general rate increases from the urban service area. Council provided staff with directions to move forward with implementing a 5% annual general rate increase for the urban service area. Hydro Service Bylaw Urban Rates Amendment Number 3619-2024 is now presented to council for adoption.
I'll move.
Moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Tate.
That the Corporation of the City of Nelson's Hydro Service Bylaw Urban Rates Amendment Number 3619-2024 be finally adopted.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any last minute concerns or questions? We don't have anybody here from Hydro, but our city manager is intimate with the workings there. Seeing none, all those in favor, and that carries. Item number 12D, rural rates on September 20.
So, Madam Mayor, so we just got the decision on the general cost of capital on Friday, which will change rural rates in 2025. So I wonder maybe we should just defer this till we find out kind of how we should manage that.
Do we have to go back to first and second reading then? Or?
Well, it has to be sent to the BCUC for after third reading, right?
Correct. So we've made a rate application. They're considering that. It's, you know, I'm just wondering if we
could do it Friday.
Should look at. Yeah, I think we should just
Okay.
find out what the
Yeah.
impact is, because
Okay.
the order does say that we need to file. Yeah, we need to file that by January 31st, 2025, and that will look at both, you know, the under recovery in 2024 because of the our cost of capital plus the impact on 25 for rural rates.
Right. Can I have a motion to refer item 12D, please? Moved by Councillor Page, seconded by Councillor Woodward. Any need for discussion on referral? All those in favor of referral, and that carries. Thank you.
Can I?
Sorry, who's that page?
Woodward. Coming to a meeting on Friday near you.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to 12E. Thank you, Kevin, for flagging that. Records management, information management. Legislative review has highlighted the need for new policies and bylaws to improve information governance. In 2024, 5 related policies were adopted, and on May the 7th, the Records Management Procedure Bylaw, 3604-2024, received its first 3 readings. Staff now requests that Council adopt Records Management Procedural Bylaw 3604-2024. Moved by Councillor Tate, seconded by Councillor Woodward. Councillor Tate.
Thanks, and I have a question after. That the Records Management Procedures Bylaw number 3604-2024 be finally adopted.
And your question, Councillor Tate.
I was curious if, because this is a bylaw, which is interesting to me, is there like a procedure that is there an internal procedure document? I was curious.
Sorry. So the bylaw, the Records Information Management Bylaw, is sort of the procedure that we follow. There's all the policies that you adopted back in May.
Right.
And so scanning standard policy,
Yeah.
records disposal policy,
Yeah.
those are the procedures that we follow. So we
Gotcha.
follow those policies.
I got muddled on the language. And then my second question was, and it just on skimming it this time, I was curious about using the corporate officer or designate. Because, and I don't know if that's something we want to think about in the future as we move forward, but I noticed that here it really spoke to me.
It's because any position that has a deputy,
Okay.
that's generally what the designate is. That's what that.
So you don't
term
have to
is.
say it, it's implied.
It can be implied, yeah.
Okay, interesting. Thanks.
Any further questions? Seeing none, that's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. Moving on to 12F. Secondary suites and laneway houses, water line upgrades. In order to reduce barriers for property owners seeking to create additional dwellings on existing properties, it is proposed to cease requiring the replacement of existing non-conforming half-inch water service connections with 3/4-inch water service connections for secondary suites and laneway houses. It is also proposed to increase the minimum size of pipe used for new service connections from 3/4 inch to 1 inch in order to foolproof infrastructure for infill. Accordingly, staff prepared subdivision and development servicing bylaw amendments, secondary suite and laneway housing service bylaw 3615. Council is now requested to pass first, second, and third readings. And I see planning staff in the back. We're getting Valerie and Natalie, or both of you, or one of you?
I can come up. Alex is.
Yeah, it'll be me.
Sorry.
Oh,
God, I didn't realize Alex.
Alex.
Hey, buddy, how are ya?
I'm here.
Oh, sorry. Well, we'll let
Okay,
Natalie
then
be
good to
there to
see you.
drive the sort of ship a little bit, but, sorry, my apologies. I didn't realize that you were up there waiting for your opportunity. So, what would council's pleasure be? Would you like a little bit of an oversight as to what this all means, or do you have direct questions? What's your pleasure?
Quick one.
I have a question.
Okay, we've got questions. So can we go with questions, Alex? You good with that? And then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I've got Councillor Page, followed by Councillor Tate.
I meant in answer to your question, a preamble, I would be okay with a quick one.
Oh, okay.
Quick preamble.
Okay, we're going with preamble then, and then we're going to Councillor Tate for a question.
All right, preamble. So as you already said, Mayor Morrison, in the summary of the bylaw amendment, there's two components to this. Both are about reducing barriers to housing creation by reducing costs, infrastructure upgrade costs. So the first part is to relax those water line size requirements for secondary suites and laneway house development by allowing existing non-conforming pipes to continue to be used, pipes that have already been servicing that property for a number of years, and not requiring that the property owner pay to have the road dug up to have those pipes replaced in order to receive the building permit. In the last year or so, on average, these when this scenario has come up, when someone's been applying to build a laneway house or add a secondary suite to their property, on average, this can cost $8,500 to do. As the estimate that's provided, sometimes it can be more than $10,000 as well too in certain cases. So particularly when we're talking about a secondary suite, which can cost a few dozen thousands of dollars to install. When we're talking about $8,000 to $10,000 just for the water upgrade alone, it's a significant increase to the project budget, which can lead to higher rents, abandoned housing projects, or also it can lead to potentially unpermitted suites. So in light of these increased costs, concrete, asphalt, everything costing more and more money, we've conducted legal and best practice research to determine whether going forward, years to come, whether this requirement still makes sense. But in light of how expensive it's become and that it's not a life safety requirement, the balance is really tilted in our analysis. And as explained, that analysis and the best practice research is detailed in the written report. And we've come to the conclusion that it does not make sense going forward to require a water line upgrade in these cases. And the emphasis is really on the word require. It's still a possibility. In many situations, it would be recommended by the city that the applicant consider paying to have their water line upgraded in order to have, a comfortable level of water flow going forward for future residents of all the dwelling units on the property. And the property owner could also come back afterwards if they're not satisfied with the water flow on the property after installing a new unit and say, hey, this is not working out for me. Can we, now I'd like to pay and have that work done. And they'd be able to do so at that time. So it's really about not requiring that to be done. It's also a resource intensive requirement and process for utilities personnel with no financial gain for the city. Not to mention that, in cases where it's potentially doesn't really lead to even a perceived benefit or for residents on that property, it's also quite a carbon intensive process as well too. The second component of this bylaw amendment is this said about future-proofing water service connections for future development. So basically just increasing the minimum size of any new pipes laid in the future from 3/4 inch to 1 inch, which will mean that in the future, if we install a water service connection tomorrow, even if it's just for a single-family house and 1 inch is oversized, if in 10 years down the road they want to add a suite in a laneway house, that would be a possibility without having to come back and dig up the road again and replace that water connection. So it's about facilitating and reducing costs for future densification.
Okay, Councillor Tate.
Thanks very much, Alex. I don't understand. I'm trying to, but I have two pieces. When the bylaw amendments come, I have to go try to find the old one to see if I can see the changes. I don't always understand what's changing, even though the report is there, because it's hard to find the old one and then see the new things. So curiosity if there is another way to present it. Although I'm 2 years in, I should be better at it by now. I didn't understand this one entirely. So I'm gonna ask for like a shorter clarification. It used to be required if you're putting in a laneway house that you would do 1.5. So for the last couple of years, people have been doing that, and it costs around $8,500. Yep. That was a bylaw, or that was plumbing regulation?
It wasn't explicitly our bylaw requirement. So the current bylaw indeed does not say that for a secondary suite or for a laneway house application, what the minimum requirements are. It's just that because it's not detailed in the bylaw, it's not specified, at very minimum, we were looking to the bylaw to where it says that the minimum service connection size has to be 19 millimeters or 3/4 inch. So in the cases where someone only has a 1/2 inch, well, they're not meeting the minimum required size for new development. So that was what the trigger was. And in certain cases, for example, if there was already a 3/4 inch, but they're adding a third dwelling unit, then the building officials and public works have been looking to the plumbing code for guidance and applying that standard. So this is about, because of the amount of the volume of secondary suite and laneway house applications we get, it's important now to really be more explicit and to add that explicit language around this kind of situation in the bylaw.
So Alex, this is going to pertain to the piece of land that's between the pipe running down the street and where my connection is to my home. So this is just the in the road part. This isn't the part
I got it.
going
That part
to
I get.
my house.
That part I get because there's a picture. I got that. So, okay, I don't care what it used to be. I can't figure that out anymore. So are we saying that there is a requirement now of 3/4 of an inch? That is a requirement and it's in a bylaw? Okay, and we are only bylawing the part that's in the picture. We only are regulating that. But if it's a 1/2 inch, then it's still going to be okay. I thought I read that. I don't understand. Say it again. Sorry. Does everybody else understand?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you tell it to me, please?
Well, it's just
through the chair.
Old is golden.
Okay.
Anything new has to be the new measurement.
Gotcha. Okay.
And that will
go
to your house.
Yeah.
If you're putting on a new development, then your service has to be that. Your service has to be that larger service. We're just talking about existing properties. So if you have a house, you want to put a a suite in it, you already have an existing service to your house, that's not what we're gonna require to, well, we can't require your property to be upgraded, so we're not going to do our part of it. If you need a new service because you're not getting the right water pressure, then you have to follow the 3/4 inch or inch, depending on what you do, or 1.5 inches, I think. So if you're fine with what's existing, we'll leave what's existing. If that's not sufficient, then you upgrade to the new standard.
What about if, may I? What about if you're fine when you're building, you're like, this is great, and you build, and then
If
later
you're
you're
building
like,
new,
you're like, oh, that's not enough.
No, if you're building new, you're
you have
gonna,
to meet the new
You
standard.
have
the new standard is yours.
Okay.
It's about the old. It'd be
Yeah.
about
Or
Leslie
adding a secondary
adding her secondary suite,
Or a Laneway
$8,000.
house, where are we on that one?
Okay.
or her suite.
I only had.
But if at a later date, you're like, oh, I don't have
The
enough
water pressure, I want, yeah.
Then you can do it.
then you,
Have to upgrade to the new standard.
okay.
Yeah, exactly. You can come back and you can say a year later, yeah, this isn't working out for me.
Right.
At least the city won't have made you do it preemptively, just
Right,
in
right.
case. Because the water flow, it really depends on a lot of the perceived water flow and how it's lived by the occupants of the different dwelling units on a property. It depends. It depends a bit on topography, and it depends on their water uses as well too. How many water using appliances they have on,
Right.
how many people are actually living there, how often they shower, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of factors that determine how it's actually lived.
Yeah, it's pretty fluid situation.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, a simple way to think about it is using the example of, I own a house, I want to put in a secondary suite. I have a 1/2 inch service going from the main all the way through to my house. We used to say you have to upgrade that service, at least from the main to the property line, which is the city-owned portion, because we can control that. You have to upgrade that, and then you do whatever you want on your side. For that person that was looking at upgrade or putting a suite in their basement, they were now having to shell out money that would functionally do nothing for them because they didn't want to upgrade their service from 1/2 inch to 3/4 to 1 inch. So we're just removing that requirement now.
Was it a bylaw requirement? It was a bylaw. That's the change, is that it's not required anymore to go to, okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank
Yeah.
you, thank you, thank you.
Just to follow up on Councillor Tate's point, just that sometimes with these bylaws, and I know that when we get it, like with fees and charges, I have to say that when I see those ones, I really appreciate when it's been redlined. Because it does make life a little bit easier. And I don't know whether it's because we're sending this out as a public agenda, or if it's possible to do that for the agendas that we get as the council, so that we can see where the changes are. But I have to say that, like, I've sat here for many years, and I could never figure out, the fees and charges bylaw. I don't know, like, if it was on paper, we'd probably go to the ceiling. And, on page 500, we've changed an and to an or, and I'm trying to find out what the implication of that is, and I can't see it. So, I mean, the redlining and the highlighting or the bolding where the change is, so I don't know whether or not we could consider that going forward on some of the more complex things that we look at. Councillor Payne.
I just have a curiosity. So on the top of, I don't know what page it is, it's under the chart, the next page. So it talks about a 1.5 inch water line would suffice, blah, blah, and this is the case in Vancouver. The last sentence says, however, Public Works is recommending pre-installing only 1 inch lines in order to conserve water. I don't understand how that's a water conservation method. Isn't the same, I mean, if you have a 1.5 or 1 inch certain pressure and you turn on your tap to fill your sink up with water, you're gonna get the same amount of water if you turn the 1.5 or the 1 inch on, depending on how long you run it. I don't know how I would save water in that situation.
I guess you could have 20 taps on with with a 1.5 inch line, whereas you might only be able to have 10 taps on with a 1 inch line.
Okay,
I would say that's.
I just.
It depends if you're filling a sink or if you're just having a shower, because then you're getting less drops per minute or whatever, but you're still getting your hair washed. But if you're filling a sink, you're right, the volume is the volume.
And that depends on the pressure too, and I'm in a place just before the pressure reduction, so in our house, it's always just shooting out of the wall anyways. Okay, I just thought it was a physics thing, and
It is a physics thing.
Yeah, and I think it totally, it makes sense to only go with the 1 inch, but the rationale is what does not make sense at all to me, so I'm good with 1, thanks.
Thought this would be an easy one. My bad. Sorry.
No, I was thinking, I had the same question the councillor, I'm like, that's twice tonight.
Oh my gosh. One more, Janice, we're in trouble.
Okay. Any further questions for staff? Well, we have Alex in the room and we've got Natalie here, and I think we get it now. So it's just like we're not making people do something for their old houses. We're golden. So we have a recommendation, and we'll do this in 2, please. So recommendation 1 of, can I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Tate. Councillor Woodward.
That the Subdivision and Development Services Bylaw Amendments, Secondary Suite and Laneway House Water Service, Bylaw number 3615, 2024, be introduced and read for the first and second time by title only.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any further questions or clarifications, council? All those in favor? And that carries. And recommendation 2. Moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Tate. Councillor Woodward.
That the Subdivision and Development Services Bylaw Amendment, Secondary Suite and Laneway House Water Services Bylaw number 3615, 2024, be introduced and read a third time by title only.
Oh, we're not.
Okay, so I don't think we
She
have any
called the
questions. We didn't have any questions last time around, so all those in favor? And that carries.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Alex.
See ya. Are you
Good
coming?
to see you too.
He's not back for more, is he?
Yeah.
Oh, he's staying on for the next one?
I'm here for one more item.
Okay, you're here for one more. Okay, so
This
we're
is
gonna
his
have
baby.
We're gonna have Valerie come up, and then I'm actually going to turn the chair to Acting Mayor Tate, because this is speaking to short-term rentals, and as a owner of a short-term rental, you can stay there and chair.
Oh, I don't have to
You
go.
don't have
Okay.
to chair from
You
here.
can chair there.
Unless you really want to chair from here.
No,
but,
I'm good. Just pass the gavel, please.
I have to. Oh yeah, you might need the gavel. I have to recuse as I have a perceived. Well, I have a real conflict of interest. It's not perceived. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor.
Welcome, Valerie. I can read the beginning. The current guiding policy on short-term rental enforcement was adopted in 2016, just prior to the new STR license and zoning rules coming into effect, and is now outdated. Accordingly, staff have prepared an updated version of bylaw enforcement guiding policy for short-term rentals number 4000.00.006 to supersede the December 5th, 2016 policy. Council is now requested to adopt the updated policy. Do you have a preamble or presentation?
I'll let Alex do the intro, and then I'll be here for questions.
Okay, thanks so much. Alex.
Yeah, so for the context and catalyst for the review of this policy in the first place, as mentioned in the report, for the first time since Council adopted the short-term rental regulations, first time since 2017, that annual license cap of 110 has been reached in the last few months. Also, as detailed in the report, the reasons why we're not proposing at this time to increase the license cap. We've contacted a number of the hotel accommodators in the city, and the numbers are in the report, and there does not appear to be a need to increase accommodation capacity in the city at this time, especially in the context of a housing shortage, where, when we look at our global strategic policies around preserving housing stock, it does not seem to be necessary at this time to consider that. So in this context, we came back and took a look at this policy. There's basically two changes. There's some housekeeping changes, as detailed in the report, sort of procedural elements that have changed since it was adopted in 2016. The main change is one that's intended to reduce staff time spent on enforcement, and that's to refuse renewal applications from short-term rental operators who have been persistently ignoring or deflecting calls by staff to come into compliance with their license and with the regulations in effect at the moment. So this is really a matter of fairness because the vast majority of short-term rental operators are complying with the license that they have and the regulations and zoning and business license bylaw. It's also a matter of fairness in the context that we've reached the cap for those who are now on the wait list to obtain a license. So there's now, I think, 7 or 8 people on the waiting list who basically have to wait until someone fails to renew their license or moves, etc., and they'd be contacted at that time. Now that we have people waiting to come into the line, we consider it unfair to continue to reserve a spot for someone who has had a license for a year or more, maybe, but who has been deflecting our calls to ask them to come into compliance with the license. So generally, what that means is there's cases where people sure they have obtained a license, but they're advertising for more spaces on their property than the license covers. For example, if they have a license for 1 room, but they're Airbnb 2 rooms, or they have a license for a secondary suite, but they're Airbnb their secondary suite and the principal dwelling unit. That's that kind of situation. There's also situations where they're advertising for more ability than they're allowed to. If you have a 4-month license or something, and you've actually been advertising for 5 or 6 months. To not basically wait for months and months and months for those cases to finally hopefully come into compliance, and at some point say, we're just not going to renew your license and accept a renewal application for the coming calendar year and liberate your free space for someone who would be on the waiting list.
Thanks. Are there any other comments?
I just want to, maybe just a clarification, maybe just speak to how the 4-month licenses work in conjunction with the longer term. Because these are averages for a month, that doesn't mean that there can be periods where there is no accommodation. In Nelson, in fact, I recall some family from Spokane that had looked in Castlegar Trail, Nelson, and could not find a place to stay in any of our communities, and basically had to go back home. So just to keep in mind, these are averages for that month. It doesn't mean on the August long weekend that we have any capacity, and but I think the 4-month licenses would allow people to make places available for those kind of peak times, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. At this point, so if someone's interested in opening up a short-term rental on their property, in addition to just adding their name to the wait list for a future annual license, there are quite a few spaces left in the cap allocation for 4-month licenses, and there are no caps on 31-day licenses as well too. And those are kind of intended for people who want to, say, Airbnb their property while they go on vacation. 4-month license is a bit more flexible than that. You can choose 4 31-day periods throughout the year to advertise your property. So there's still quite a bit of flexibility.
Councillor Woodford.
Thank you. Alex, so as we kind of hover at the max of Airbnbs in this town, it kind of concerns me that people are going to start skirting the edges because there's that demand, right? Now the hoteliers are saying that they have space to fill that demand.
Well,
is that
like I said, I think yes in
averages.
In the average, but there's definitely places where we're completely full, and that's why I wanted Alex to speak to. There are some 31-day licenses, there are 4-month licenses that should be able to pick up that demand. Okay,
because anytime your system gets right up to the wall, people are going to be like, well, I can make some money here, and so but But it also feels like if we raise that cap, it'll just fill to the next cap. So it's a funny situation that we're in here now.
Yeah. On your last point there, Councillor Woodward, indeed, like the fact that we have almost 10 people now, I think 7 or 8, as I said, on the wait list. If you were to increase the cap to accommodate those people, that would be an increase of almost 8%, just like that, just to eliminate the wait list that we've accumulated in the last 30 days. I think it's been about 30 days that we put that wait list up. So it's happened quite quickly. That's certainly a concern. I agree. We are proactively monitoring and continuing enforcement on these short-term rentals. So it's something to continue to monitor, and we'll for sure come back to council if that becomes a concern. However, we do have the capacity at this point to follow up on illegal short-term rentals. We're monitoring regularly on a bi-weekly basis through host compliance, the platform for compliance monitoring that we've been using since 2017. There's also a new provincial portal as well too that's able to provide us data with the data sharing arrangement that the province has been able to negotiate with Airbnb and VRBO in particular, which is able to kind of provide us data with another angle, data that's provided directly from those operators as well too. So we are getting regular high quality data in from literally all of the listings and any new listings that pop up. And we have been able to identify, our track record going back to 2017, we have been able to identify the address of all of those with the provincial sharing arrangement with Airbnb and VRBO. That happens even quicker now and it's more automated. So it's a matter then of following up, of course, which does take time.
Yeah.
It's one thing we see, but we are able to see the listing, find out what the address is, and then follow up, starting with the letter, with the typical bylaw enforcement process. So yeah, we would be able to catch them, and there's also a possibility. There's also a tool that's part of that arrangement with between the province and the operators that at some point, if the operator continues of an illegal short-term rental continues to ignore our correspondence, that we're able to request directly to Airbnb or VRBO to have that listing just removed. So we actually have more tools. We've acquired more tools in the last year than we've had previously, and even before we've been able to follow up. So
okay, thank you very much, Alex. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll do Councillor Page and then Councillor Peñaro.
Hey, Alex. Thanks for the work. It makes sense.
For sure.
It makes sense to me that we make these changes and bring these enforcement pieces in place. I'm curious as well with the subscription of the service and the oversubscription to those year-long fees. If, as we monitor and maybe develop policy changes, can we look at language around making the fees adjustable and incorporating higher fees to reduce waiting lists and reallocating monies towards affordable housing funds that we might make above and beyond what we currently have set?
In general, we're not able to do that per se. So business licensing fees are required to sort of cover the cost of administering that program. So our fees already in Nelson are actually there are some now in certain places in Canada that have exceeded our fees. For a long time, ours were really the highest, but that has changed. Many communities are lower, but our fees are relatively high because of the amount of resources that we spend, both in staff time and with technology to conduct this enforcement. So there's not really a mechanism in legislation to increase business licensing fees to redirect that money to housing.
Follow up?
Yeah.
I'd be curious to have those discussions a little bit more in depth, and I know I'm not expecting us to do it here, but I think there's planning work that flows off of how we deal with the impact of short-term rentals that can certainly be costed into a program, but might need some planning in terms of how we structure short-term rental impact program so it can be captured within business licensing fee.
It's in that other one that
And certainly a legal
tourism
review as
one.
well.
Yes. All the legal reviews.
They have to be real costs that we incur, not.
They are real costs.
Not opportunity costs or those other things. But we can.
Just a comment on that, for the STRs, what's that tourism tax? You can make
MRDT.
The MRDT. If that could be where you might capture it if that ever changed, right? There you go. You're welcome.
One spot, one of many.
Councillor
Many
Pinheiro.
fruits in a fruit basket.
Let's go with the low hanging.
Councillor Pinheiro has a question or comment.
That's great.
So just a couple things around enforcement, I guess. If we have people that are sort of serially ignoring our dictates and then they're not renewed, you spoke to it a little bit where we could then potentially down the line like call up Airbnb and have them kick them off the platform. Am I understanding that right? And if that's my understanding is correct, could we not just require of Airbnb that they have a license, like it's sort of a cart before the horse situation, but if they have a license from the city that they reside in, then they can be allowed on Airbnb, and if they don't, then they can't? That seems a lot more concise and easier than chasing after them for months and months and months in order to get compliance. And then down the road, if we just say that we're not renewing your license, these people are already operating outside of our licensing rules anyhow, and what's to stop them from just going completely rogue and just having an illegal short-term rental? And then if we then kick them off and take somebody else, we're actually multiplying our short-term rentals, sort of not on purpose, but that is the effect. If we have a bunch of, like, we're maxed out on legal ones, and then all the ones that we don't license just become illegal ones, then, do you see this sort of the danger that I'm seeing? It seems, I don't know if this exists, but is there an ability to just require that if Airbnb wants to function here, that they only function with people that have a license?
I think I'll respond to the question in reverse order, starting with the end. So again, we are able to, to monitor and then follow up. Of course, it takes time, and that's, the reason why there are fees and charges and money collected through bylaw tickets to do that follow up. But when there are listings on any of these platforms, Airbnb, VRBO, and others, that don't have a license, we do see that, and we are able to follow up. So the only, for an illegal short-term rental to be operating without, without us knowing about it, it's going to be a word of mouth Airbnb or maybe flyers or something like that. If as long as it's online, we're going to be able to see it and then do that follow up and issue tickets and to the point that at some point they'll take it down. And indeed, it isn't the case that we haven't been able to really test it yet and see how well that system works, asking Airbnb to delete a listing directly. Again, all of this has, so to the first part of your question, Councillor, it's all being negotiated and has been negotiated and managed by the province. So Airbnb from the get-go up to this day hasn't really been interested in giving cities like us, even bigger cities, really the time of day. A few cases, there's been a few, I think Amsterdam managed to have an agreement with them, but not Nelson. So thankfully, the province has taken it under the responsibility to negotiate with these platforms and reach agreements. So those are the ones that we're operating under. And indeed, now if you go on to Airbnb to create a new listing, you do have to put in a business license number, which is a great first step. However, we've also heard that there's ways to skirt around that. Even then, you can say to Airbnb, "Oh, I'm exempt." Okay, and even then, Airbnb doesn't have a copy of our business license record, so the number might not be right. But in either event, once the listing is up, we're able to follow up, within a couple of weeks and see that listing and see what issues there are, whether there's a business license number there or not. It certainly helps our enforcement efforts if that business license number is in the listing and is accurate, but it's not. We're still able to identify them without that. So, that's in place, but it's not a perfect system either, and that's been negotiated by the province. That answers your question.
Yeah, and just
I was also just going to say, sorry, go ahead.
Just a follow up to that, like at 100, 110, is that what the number was? And that those don't count any of the ones that are downtown. And just, anecdotally speaking, having lived here for 30 years, everyone, like I used to live downtown and now nobody lives downtown. So I would say that this is a significant impact on our housing supply, like very much. And so I kind of applaud any effort to enforce or potentially do away with it completely, because it's terrible. But thank you.
As stated in the report, there are indeed about 40 of those short-term rentals in the commercial areas, mostly in the downtown, on top of the 110. So, it brings up the count to around 150, just within city limits. But I just wanted to quickly, if I may, back to Councillor Page's question there around, just to also highlight that the tourism tax, I don't know that I can't really speak to the exact mechanisms of it, but the tourism tax that's currently levied on hotels and short-term rentals, there is a choice to be made whether that goes towards, the money collected goes towards tourism marketing, as it is currently, or affordable housing. There is something there to use that revenue for that, but I don't have all the details off the top of my head.
No, that's fair. Thank you.
Working on it.
Just trying to fill the basket.
Councillor Payne has a question.
Just a quick question, Alex. In the report, it says that Roslyn is more aggressive in enforcing the bylaw. I'm just interested to know, other than the the host compliance software that the city utilizes and the province having the relationships with the two largest providers, what other means are there to be more aggressive? It's not important. I'm just curious about it.
You want me to take that one, Alex?
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Okay. Yeah, just a conversation we had with one of the enforcement officer in Roslyn, and they just described their procedures. They have like the deadlines they give to people are way shorter. Their fines are higher.
Okay,
just
got it.
things like that. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you. That's what I was trying to understand. Got it. Makes sense. So I just want to clarify from some conversations that I've heard that this is, can't remember what the name of it is. This is the type of bylaw where.
This is a policy.
Thank you. But it's a type of enforcement that bylaw enforces. You do not have to report that you believe your neighbor is operating an illegal Airbnb.
It's not complaint-based.
It's not complaint-based. Thank you. That's exactly what I was looking for.
Proactive
So yeah,
enforcement.
this is, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. This is all tracked and business licensed, and there's a piece of software that can identify those individuals that are working outside of the system that we've established here.
Yeah.
And that's directly related to the variation in the fees for business licensing, right? So, just a business license, I can't remember the fee, $80 or 100 and something for a simple home-based business. With that kind of fee collected, we're not able to take staff time to go around and knock on people's doors and troll the internet to find illegal home-based businesses that don't have a license. But the policy is really that it's a complaint-based enforcement. It's really just short-term rentals and parking that are, you don't have to report on your neighbor parking by law around it. So
Gotcha.
It's the exception more than.
Thank you. Just want that clarified out loud.
CAO, did you have something, or were you something else?
I'm not.
Okay.
Just curious on Jesse's comment. We'll try to get how many rental suites we do have in the downtown? Because I think there are 4.
It says 40 in the report.
rental suites.
Rental.
downtown. Long-term.
Oh, you mean as far as, all of
Yeah,
them, yeah.
because I can think of a few different
Me too.
buildings that
There's quite a
do
few.
have, but
40 less than there was.
yeah, I think some of those are new, like over here. And
Yeah.
I think,
Thank
Councilor Panero, you're talking a lot about the,
Above the
they used to be above the stores.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think we, you know, the building above Camel's, the what's the block on, where the clothing store, I think that's long-term rental. So anyway, it would be interesting.
It would be interesting to know.
Know those numbers, and you know what, and we should monitor them. You know, what is happening to those.
Thanks. Councillor Page had one more.
Alex, with the changes to the province and some of the challenges you identified earlier around licensing and checking the licensing, it makes me think about what the province is doing to garner feedback on how well the program is working, and is there some sort of technical provincial body? Are we contributing? Is there going to be a reflection in a year or so? Like, what is that? Do we have any sense? Do you have any sense of what that looks like, and for those opportunities to look for places to tighten these programs up?
Val, do you want to answer that question?
Sure. Yeah, I would say the provincial program is still pretty new. Like they just have staff their compliance and enforcement unit, and the provincial registry will be up, they said, early 2025. So yeah, I think maybe in a year or two we'll have gathered enough data to see like what the impact of the program has been, and maybe make some tweaks in our regulations. And I don't know what their regulation is going to look like, but I think it's a little bit too early right now. It's still the early stages of the program.
They haven't communicated more than the process of a launch at this point.
No.
Okay. Thanks. I'm good.
Should I call the question?
I was just making eye contact. Everybody's good? Okay, so I think we have a mover and a shaker, a seconder.
Yep.
Did we? I don't know that. Did we move this or did we go?
You read out the policy.
No, you know what? I read the intro. So would anyone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Woodward. Anyone like to second? Councillor Pinheiro. Are you able to read it?
The bylaw enforcement guiding policy for short-term rentals number 400.00.006 as revised be adopted.
Any last minute questions? All those in favor? And that passes.
Okay.
Thanks. And would someone please grab Janice? Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
good night.
Alex.
Oh yeah, thank you so much, Alex. Nice to see your face.
You too.
Take care. Nice to see you too. Are you
while
sticking around?
We're waiting for Janice.
Yes.
Were we going to loop back to the city manager verbal report that we missed before the break, or we were just skipping it?
We're skipping it.
I was just curious
That's
if I misunderstood.
That's what Janice said.
Yeah, I
Yep.
think we're.
Okay, I just didn't hear her. I was just curious. It's all good. Catch you at the water cooler.
Hey, Sarah.
Yes.
Short-term rental, management, mitigation, adaptation, planning. Seems like something business licenses should pay for.
Communication.
Mitigation,
There's
impact mitigation.
Sturmimperp.
Just like we were gonna charge more for police to do cannabis,
2025.
right? Well, that's why it was 3,000, so we could deal with the community safety aspect.
But you haven't received
Make short-term rentals a felony.
You put $1,000
We don't
on
have
that.
the,
You put $1,000 on all of
jurisdiction.
them. There's
Authority
your
for that.
community safety. There's your social development coordinator. Done. Funded.
Done. Clean, tidy.
Nice.
It's in camera portion.
Yeah, we had some off the table motions.
Yep. We're getting a social development officer. I left the room. Yep.
It's happening.
We're all set.
The new speaker.
It's gonna be fun.
All right.
Dramatic increase in
My short-term rental is paying for it now.
Any short-term rental that is not near the hospital. No.
Well, that's where all my people go. Okay. So, you guys got through that one. So, 13 is done, and we're on to 14, and I always somehow mess up the easiest part of the agenda here, so we're gonna open it up. And on to item 14, so we have, under reports, we have reports from Finance, Development Services, 2 of them. So building permit statistics and official community plan report. Is there anything there that anybody wants to pull out for further discussion, or can we pass them as items 1, 2, and 3?
I'll move them.
I'm thinking that there's a question here.
Okay.
Councillor Payne.
I just had a question. I know I can email this beforehand, but I didn't take a look at it till last thing. What happened at the police department? There was a renovation. Didn't know. Maybe I missed it. I'm just interested. It's hard to tell because you walk in and you know the doors.
It's all
Part of the
NG 911.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
perfect.
So it's part of that expansion.
Okay. And that's under that budget as well then, the renovation. Okay, thank you. Quick and easy.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
And it might be for the planner regarding the OCP report. These policy intentions, so is that kind of an encapsulation of the feedback that you received? Is that a rephrasing? Or was that, I didn't totally understand those bullet points.
This summer we did 3 surveys. They were to help us decide the policy intentions that would inform our objectives. So it's kind of the high-level policy in the OCP.
Okay.
And this is just a summary of the public engagement results that happened from this spring.
This is a summary of what you heard.
That's
It's
right.
a bit of a what we heard.
It
as
is a
opposed
bit
to
of
what
a-
we were looking for.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. And it's just to give an update to council on sort of what's next for the OCP. We're hoping to bring a draft in January, and we'll release that hopefully at the COW meeting in January. And then at that time, it'll also be released to the public so that they can comment on the draft as well.
Do not disturb.
Oh, somebody's beeping now. Any further questions on the items? So we'll try this one more time. Items 1, 2, and 3. I think I have a mover in Councillor
Yep.
Woodward
I
to
move that.
move them together for receipt for information. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Payne. All those in favor of moving items 1, 2, and 3 for information?
Did we get?
It was moved and seconded, so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
all
was
those in
up.
favor?
I was up.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm just like, everybody's, I know it's getting late, but we're doing pretty good here. So thank you for that. And then we have minutes from meetings. So we've got the minutes of the Cultural Development Committee of October the 9th, the Public Library from September the 26th, and the Nelson Public Library from October the 7th. Is there anything in any one of these reports that anybody wants to pull out, or can we move for information?
I'll move.
Okay, items 1, 2, and 3 have been received for information. Moved. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Pinero. All those in favor of the minutes being received for information, and that carries. Thank you very much. So in this section, we also cover correspondence, and I'm just wondering if anybody had anything that they wanted to pull out from the correspondence package that you have received in a separate email before this meeting. I think we got it a couple days ago. Councillor Payne.
So is this where we can
This
talk
is where
about
you
the
get to-
CP? Okay. So last Wednesday night, what was the date of that event? November the 28th?
Thursday.
Thursday? Yes, I'm talking about the train.
Night of the recreation meeting.
The night of the
So it's
recreation
Thursday,
meeting.
the 28th.
So we had a lot of people going to an event that started at 6 o'clock on the north side of the tracks And at that time, a lot of people were both leaving work from the same side of the tracks and traveling through the city to presume go home on the North Shore and further, which created, I gotta say, the most traffic I have ever seen on the highway going end to end. I didn't know that I'd see stop and go traffic like that. So I guess my major concern, and we did have correspondence from a number of individuals asking us about the safety around that. So that's what I just wanted to get a deeper level of clarification on. How are we responsible as a community to ensure that if something like that happens, where 2 of the 3 crossings that go through the city are blocked?
So which one of you guys want to
Well,
talk about?
I'll start. Yeah, we do look at, the general principle is, we can't predict where we may have an incident, and your emergency management program is set up to deal with emergencies on the fly, I guess. So after that first incident, that was, there was awareness by fire. The information they had at the time was that the train was going to be removed in a timely fashion, and that changed over the course of the evening. They weren't able to remove that train, and that changed how we responded to it. So that's the general principle. In the case, for one of my things that I brought forward when we debriefed it a bit was we know this is a particular sensitive area of our city, and we know we have something that could disrupt it. And so, so we are going to do some advanced planning of how we would manage an incident such as that. So I know the public works staff, did they did debrief with CP on that, and I'll let Chris speak to that. But it is definitely on our radar. Our emergency management team would react to any emergency if it's deemed that, and that's the job of that team, is to address that type of situation. But as I said, I think knowing the fact that this can happen, we should do some more advanced planning and communication, and I'll let Chris speak to sort of the debrief with CP around the first incident and whatever additional knowledge on the second one.
Sure, yeah, and maybe perhaps, everybody kind of knows, fundamentally what happened is a train blocked, access. So I don't think there's a lot to be discussed, what happened, this, that, or the other thing. The matter is we have these tracks that run through our town and they aren't going anywhere. So, it's entirely, possible that this could happen again. We saw 2 incidents in a matter of, a week, essentially. So, there has been, from the debrief with CP, when you go through an event like this, you really try to break down what happened and sort of, what fell through and identify what needs to happen. So I think, identifying what needs to happen is communication is a critical piece here. Is just, one, for our own internal communications. So the first incident happened later at night. How do we make sure that communication gets to our staff and those other critical staff like SD8 to get to the school buses and RDCK for the following morning on the other side of the tracks, and the other important, businesses that are there that there's a fair amount. And then there's the other sort of public communication about, hey, there's an issue happening down there, steer clear of Nelson Ave, if at all possible, that type of thing. So I can tell you that we're working on what that communication looks like. We don't have a full answer right now. That's something that typically, you debrief on, you work out some procedures, you talk to a bunch of people about it. So that stuff does take time, but know that the staff are working on that process. The other thing is, ensuring that we have, so that's communication is at one side. That's being worked on both for internal and external public-facing communications on that. The other end is just ensuring that, if there is a medical emergency or if something major happens down there, one of the questions that we asked CP is it possible that all exits could be blocked at once? So it seems very much unlikely, given that there are there is an at-grade crossing in the CP yards in Railtown area that essentially extends or adds that extra access point. The trains that we see go by are only so long. These are not cross-country goods moving trains. They basically service Mercer, Celgar, and Tech. So they only have so many cars. They know what the limit is. They have limitations on this type of track, et cetera, et cetera. So it's more about now from that side is just ensuring that there's good procedures in place for how to access one of those unique exits or entry points, access egress points, should the need arise. So how would fire service go down through Railtown, or how would the fire service access by the bridge and then come through the back of Lakeside Park? So that's the other discussion that is being sort of hammered out with CP to make sure that all of those communications are there. And I'll just say that CP was a really great partner in that, and it's in their prompt communications with our fire department, which is our first point of contact for all of this stuff. So they did a really great job there, and really it was, there's a lot of opportunity for us to improve on how that message gets passed around amongst all the groups. Additionally, there is attention put to other areas. We know that, if the west waterfront were to develop, that we will want another crossing there, because that would be too long of a dead end road, similar to other dead end roads that we have. But so we'd be looking for a crossing on 7th Street, right? That's already kind of built out there. So this is something that we'll plan for now, make sure that we're ready for it, but there's also sort of longer term planning that will further mitigate the possibility of it happening rather than just trying to mitigate the impacts of when it does happen.
Great, thanks. So just as a person sitting there in a vehicle, is that do you call anybody, or do you just be patient, or because people started turning around, which in my opinion then becomes a danger, right? Because when people are turning their vehicles around and other people are trying to get through, now all of a sudden traffic is getting really messy.
Yeah, I think primarily police will respond to, something like that.
So just a police non-emergency line.
Yeah, police are, part of their duties is to manage traffic. Again, that gets overwhelmed. They don't have capacity to do that. That's when the EOC would activate and find additional resources, bring in flaggers or whatever else. So that's, any emergency, the first responders try to deal with it. If it escalates, they can't deal with it, then more resources are action. But I think, as Chris said, I think we can do some more planning on that, and look at how that would get actioned in the future. I think this is certainly the first time, I believe, since I've been here that we had a train blocking the tracks in Nelson. First and second times.
Exactly.
So
wow. Okay.
Yeah. So
well, that's good to hear that.
Yeah, definitely some
Opportunity
lessons to be learned. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
And my apologies, I said it was in our correspondence package that we'd gotten from Maddie, but it was actually just a recent online submittal form that came raising the concern. It's not in the correspondence package. I was just
She
looking
sent
for it
two,
again.
right?
She sent a late one? Okay, so I haven't seen that.
No, it was just an update.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it is also correspondence to a certain degree. Yeah, okay, thanks.
Okay, so that was all fun and exciting, and I just want to say that their media relations, their government relations person, Mike Lavecchio, is excellent in terms of the fact of calling. He sends immediately to me a message. I got the train derailment one at like 11:30. He was mid-air and was waiting to touch down to be able to send me a message about the first incident, and he was on the second one. And for matter of fact, I thought, oh, that's interesting. And I'm driving down reading the text, and I'm crossing those train tracks. And by the time I got down from my house to come to the meeting, everything looked absolutely normal again. I do recall the backup of traffic we had when the developer along Lakeside forgot to, we got quite a few phone calls that day that came into the office when they forgot to get the signage up about the fact that they had closed Lakeside Drive, so that wasn't the train, that was a builder.
Oh, I remember that one. Yep.
So, okay, we have no notice of motions, and we had no late items brought forward at the beginning of the meeting, so we're on to item 17, which is a resolution to close the meeting to the public. It is an opinion of the council that the public interest requires that persons other than members of council and staff in any approved audiences be excluded from this meeting, and that the meeting of council continue under section 91 A, B, and I on matters regarding the personal information about an identifiable individual who is being considered for position appointed by the municipality, personal information about an identifiable individual who is being considered for a municipal award or honor, the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of lands or improvements. Wow, we're gonna be here all night. So if I could have a motion to close the meeting to the public, please. Moved by Councillor Payne, seconded by Councillor Tate. All those in favor? And that carries. Okay.